What never going to happen to me event happened to you. I won a raffle in 4th grade. The prize was a duffel bag. I was so happy. I just won a motorcycle at work about a week ago. I've got 2. The first was my father having an affair. The second was driving 8 hours for a job interview, only to realize that I had PM and AM mixed up, so I missed the interview by 12 hours. I cried the whole way back home. Getting my house raided by the police. Was living with a roommate at the time, and he was a bit of a green herb user but not a dealer. We think that he bought something from someone who was being watched, and the cops thought that my flatmate was in distribution. I got shot. I definitely didn't see that one coming. I was walking in downtown Montreal a few weeks back, and someone came up to me on the street and asked if I wanted to buy any substances. As a kid growing up, I was led to believe this would happen all the time, but this was the first time. This happened to me in downtown Red Deer. I told the guy no, I don't do that. In reality, I was just highly suspicious of this guy. I wonder if he was a narc or wanting to steal money. I mean, who the heck sells or buys from a random person in the street these days? What a minefield to navigate for both parties. Remember, just say no, unless there's a bunch of cool kids doing it. When I was 18, I was offered 10 grand to marry a girl from Sweden. I'm American, and she wanted to stay in the US. I didn't go through with it. As someone who's lived in both countries, I've got to say that she was either an Americanophile or, more likely, not actually from Sweden. It may be cold there, but the standard of living is through the roof compared to most places, especially the States. Sorry, Americans. Being in a long-distance relationship. I always thought people who did it were insane or even desperate. Turns out you can have every option in the world and still only want the one person who lives far away from you. Fathering a disabled child. As devastating as it is to find out your kid is disabled, it's crazy how it stops being about how it would impact your life and it shifts entirely to how it will impact their future. At least, that's how it was for me. Becoming a widow at 25. 3 years this late October. I miss her every day. She got sick and led up to having heart failure. She got a ride home from work. I had to drop off a coworker whose car had broken down. I would have been the one to pick her up. Someone didn't see her until too much time had passed. Realizing that someone I love was part of one of America's many weapon-related tragedies. I watched the news for a few hours, saw that there was a siege situation in the mall. Hey, isn't that where my sister's name works? Is she working today? 3 people dead, 1 expected to be the perpetrator. Oh, well, there's hundreds of people in the mall at any time. I just wonder why she hasn't called us yet. The event took place around a food court. She works near the food. Could have been anyone, though. Who knows? Here's a picture of the bullet-riddled walls and witness reports. Wow, this is on every news station. It's been a few hours. Where is she? It took place on the upper-level food court. Oh crap. The only stores up there are hers and some kids' shops. No one with a sane mind would open fire at them, but he wasn't sane, obviously. You're awful. You're just wishing that little kids were dead instead of your sister. Every person would, wouldn't they? It took place in, they named the store she worked at. It's a populous store. There could be lots of people there. 1 female, 2 male, one of which is the expected perpetrator. She works in there. She's a female. Female, early 20s, white, expected to work at the store. That's her exact description. But lots of girls look like that who work there. And then the phone rang. Went to my first club, 16 to 21-year-olds allowed, on senior week about 2 weeks after turning 18. Met a girl who actually seemed into me. We left and ended up doing the deed on the beach. Turns out she was 14 and lied to me when I asked her earlier, even showing me a fake ID. But that didn't matter to the cops, of course. Another of America's tragedies at my high school. It's pretty messed up to think about how one person who hardly anybody knew could affect so many people's lives so unexpectedly. Falling in love. My parents can't really stand each other, so I just assumed I'd end up the same way. A while back, I dated a guy for nearly a year before finding out he was actually living with his real girlfriend of about 8 years. As soon as I found out, I introduced myself and told her, crying, and she just shrugged her shoulders and rolled her eyes. Didn't care at all. It was surreal. None of our mutual friends knew or suspected either, which makes me feel slightly better about my lack of character discernment skills. I never thought that I'd dislike the person I've become. I'm not even a terrible person or anything, I just don't like myself. I won a new bike in 2nd grade during a raffle. I remember I was walking out of school when I heard my name on the intercom saying I won. Holy crap, what a day that was, right before the Christmas holiday too. I thought car accidents only happened to other people, and then I let my friend drive my car. I guess I was kind of right? Alcohol and substance addict. 18 months clean and sober though, so that's pretty cool. Coming home to find out my significant other had cleared their stuff out of my apartment, turned off the cable, internet and phones, and wouldn't answer their cell. We're no longer together. Lost my 32-year-old brother to a sudden heart attack. I thought nothing bad would ever happen to me, and now my family is pretty mashed up. Discovering I was a victim of a horrible home situation growing up. I always thought my family was perfect. A friend of mine who I'd known for half my life, 14 years, was also my roommate. We're also old army pals. He's very dependent on having a girlfriend, so when he starts dating a new girl, everything else ceases to be important. He's always been this way. A couple of months ago, we're still roommates, but he stopped communicating with me slowly over the course of a couple of weeks and starts to sleep over at his girlfriend's house more and more often. I go on a trip to Muscle Shoals, Alabama with my dad on a Friday and return Sunday evening. It was hot as heck, so I went to my friend's room to see if he might have an extra fan I could borrow. I opened his door and all of his stuff was gone. He waited until I was gone for the weekend and skipped out on the lease, and all without saying a word to me. He could have just told me he was moving out, but he just left me holding the bag after avoiding me for a few weeks. I thought I'd done something wrong, but after thinking about it and talking to our other friends, who he also bailed on and wasn't speaking to, I realized he must have had some serious emotional problem with latching onto women and feels like everyone else can screw off when he has a girlfriend. I just hope he's doing all right and everything works out for him. Well, I suspect and kind of hope things didn't work out with that partner because it seems like they were a pretty bad influence on his life, regardless of how good a person they were. I do hope that it ended and he got help and learned to treat others better, because he and the people around him would benefit from that. Emotional and mental breakdown. Trouble having a baby. We've been trying for years, it's a drag. Not the bedroom part, that part's been great. Getting cheated on. Getting addicted to smoking. Frick. A girl that asked me out? I was so surprised I didn't know what to do. Turned out we weren't compatible and I'm alone again, +1 to life experiences. Brett the Hitman Hart gave me his sunglasses as a kid when he came to my town. Stands to this day as the best moment of my life. Getting caught cheating on a huge test. You never think you'll get caught cheating if you cheat. You're always supposed to be afraid of getting caught cheating, but because you take those precautions to not get caught, you never actually think it's going to happen. But be honest, if you got caught, you wouldn't even know what to do. You'd have an idea, but the minute it happens, you can bet your butt that you'll stumble your words together unless you're a certified pathological liar. God forbid it's the SATs or some other state or national test. The odds are against you too. Once they suspect you of cheating, there isn't crap you can say against it besides, no I didn't. And at that moment you proceed to crap your pants and wait for their verdict on whether or not you should continue your life. 6th grade was frickin' rough, man. I had a ghost poop. I mean, I've heard stories about it, but to experience the crap yet be so clean for the wipe, it really is a haunting experience. Dropped my phone in a goddamn toilet. It happened last summer. I had an iPhone 4 for 3 years before it finally fell into the watery abyss and died. I then finally upgraded to the 5S, which was thankfully half the price from the Verizon upgrade price, because of the iPhone 6 release. I used to make fun of people who dropped their phones in toilets. I mean, I still do, but I used to too. I have a positive one. Graduating high school and college without being on ADD med. I had it drilled into me by my mother and psychologists as a child that I'd never be able to get through high school, let alone college, without being on meds. I'll admit, my grades could be better, but I'm a 3L in law school, and while school has been hard, I've never had to feel trapped inside my own mind, and all of my success has been my own. I mean, I'm kind of the opposite here. My parents told me all through elementary and middle school I was probably ADD and should look into meds. I did just fine, slightly above average in high school, B student in college. I had trouble focusing consistently and was fidgety all the time. But I worked, was in a fraternity, and played club sports. I just assumed I wasn't as focused of a student as I should have been. Went to grad school, that didn't work, studied and still seemed mediocre. So I went to a psychiatrist with absolutely no expectations just to feel it out. I even told the doctor I'm not expecting anything, but I was tired of just assuming I was completely fine. Ended up being diagnosed with moderate ADHD. I know it's one of the most overdiagnosed disorders, but it's made school and general productivity much easier at times. Being in a horrible relationship. It was when I was first in college. He snuck it up on me with mental and emotional attacks at first. I was already getting sick of that when he pushed me, which was the last straw. I came out of it with some baggage, but I was very lucky not to have it worse. I was a criminal justice major in college, and then one night I went to jail while tripping on mushrooms, and my teacher drove me to said jail. Depression. 2 years or so in, and I really can't remember when it came on. Just sorta snuck up on me. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Turning out gay. Now, granted, for 10 or 11 of those years before it happened, I didn't even really have a concept of what gay was. For that span of time, I never thought it would happen to me because I never thought of it at all. But between learning the concept and me finding out that that was me, I didn't ever really think it would happen. Coming out to myself was a gloriously horrible crap show. Up to that point, I was perfectly fine with and supportive of other people who were gay. I didn't see a reason why I shouldn't be, considering that their personal lives weren't any of my business. But when I realized I liked guys, that was my business and I didn't want any of it. I'd always wanted to grow up normal and get married and have kids of my own and not worry about having to fight for every inch of progress in my life. I mean, I was a middle-class white boy, the jackpot combination of Western society. Who would seriously trade that in? Keep in mind that this was my thought process when I was 14 or 15. I've long since come to my senses. And I'm getting a lot of replies from people currently in this position. I want you to know that I feel for you guys and it really, really, really does get better. If you ever need support or advice, I strongly recommend checking out the LGBT subs on Reddit. There's a whole network of them catering to a wide array of interests, so even if you don't feel like a stereotypical gay, you can find something that suits you there. You can start at Reddit LGBT. My picture being randomly taken from Google Image, horribly photoshopped to make me bald, and used for an ad for a crappy hair product in Congo. Someone from there recognized my face on the ad because I have a popular blog. Still blows my mind. I still can't believe women actually allowed me to stick my eggplant in them, and for that, I'm grateful. Many of us feel the same way, my friend. It takes us a few rounds to realize that if it keeps happening, maybe we're not the horrible freaks that we think we are. Becoming a smoker, doing substances, being diagnosed with a mental illness, realizing I'm bisexual, and failing uni a couple of times. Dated someone who turned out to be a sociopath and ruined my life. It's better now. Losing my home and everything I owned in a fire. It happened right before Thanksgiving last year. Still haven't really recovered financially or emotionally. Three-way. Boom. I got the crap beat out of me, not literally, while traveling abroad. I was in Madrid, drunkenly walking back home, and these guys were like, "Sup, man, you some kind of African?" I told them no. They had a bottle of booze and wanted me to take a shot. I declined and they got all mad and said no Africans should turn them down. One of them grabbed me and I threw a punch, tried to fight them off, but there were 3 of them. I woke up in an alleyway across the street at 5 a.m. or so. They didn't steal anything, just beat me down. Just the dark turn my teen years took. The self-injury, the inner rage hospitalizations, it's like living in a post-apocalyptic world. Sometimes I think back to when I was little. I know that version of me never would have thought that this was who I'd become. I really let that little kid down. I used to be so sure of who I was, what I'd do, where I was going. Everyone always said I was smart and that I looked like I had my crap together, but the truth is I haven't been that right since I was 6. My parents divorced and no one really knows what that does to a kid who's quiet and out of the way. I lost my confidence. I wasn't as good as before, I had to fake it. Be someone else at school for attention. After so long at faking, you don't really know who you are anymore. You could be anyone. Your self-image gets all smudged. Anyway, long story short, too late I know, all of this is on me now. People say the past dies, but it doesn't really. It breathes on my skin, and I have to find a way to move ahead regardless of what happened. Because it's death to stay behind and to watch everyone else move ahead in life without you. That I would lose a lot of my self-confidence. It's a long story, but I'm currently trying to force myself to become better and believe in myself. I was in high school walking home drunk after a party, holding an empty handle of Fireball whiskey. I was stumbling all the way home for 2 miles and cars were passing and honking. Drunk as I was, my brain couldn't figure out what they were trying to tell me. To my luck, a cop turned his sirens on and pulled me to the curb. I sat there laughing my butt off while he called my parents to pick me up. I was once caught doing the deed in the park with someone I was cheating with. She was the girlfriend of my friend at school. At about 8 in the evening, while we were doing the good old doggy behind a wall deep inside the park, a guy approached us and handcuffed the both of us immediately. We both literally cried in front of the police guy to set us free by bribing him money and our mobile phones. At first he said, "Son, that's not how it works here. Wait for the police cars and we'll settle these at the station. Also, I may file charges on you for trying to bribe a police officer." After about an hour of negotiation and after we showed him all of our valuable things and offered it to him as a bribe, the fricking truth was revealed. The police guy was not police. After taking all of our money and phones, he made us raise our hands after he removed the handcuffs and made us turn around. After a couple of seconds, we were both crying with fear from the thought of catching a bullet in the back. And then the guy just ran away, laughing, and yelled, "You lusty motherfrickers got what you deserve! Doing the deed in the park? Ha ha!" Frick. I did get what I deserved for cheating. I'll never do it again. I still remember that guy's face. We were both 17 when this happened. I regret having a girlfriend before high school ended. Too bad it was only a month before we graduated. Actually falling in love with someone. I just never understood how people could get so vulnerable and depend on their significant other that much emotionally. I accidentally took too many substances and ended up in hospital for about 2 or 3 days. I had a tooth abscess and it was the most painful thing I've experienced so far. The dentist gave me antibiotics, but they'd take a while to kick in. I was taking ibuprofen, but it wasn't helping, so I started taking it with some paracetamol and that worked. So I carried on doing that, but throughout the day it started to work less and less, so I was taking them closer together. It got to the point where there was only an hour or 2 between taking them. The thought crossed my mind that I was taking too many, but I was in too much pain to care. Next day, my mum asks me how I'm feeling and how many tablets I took the day before, and she says I probably took way too many, but I think nothing of it. Cut to a few hours later, and I've been in bed all day being ill. So we head to the A&E where I get admitted because the levels in my liver are high and they want to monitor me. My cheek had also become swollen, so there was talks of being transferred to another hospital for surgery. I had 2 doctors check me over, repeatedly asked if I'd attempted to end things, and told I'd need to see the psych team, but I was discharged before that happened. I never thought I'd end up in hospital, let alone for something like that. Sunday, I was driving down the road and a snake crawled out from under my sun visor. I'm very thankful that the author of this comment could send it to us from beyond the grave, because I'm assuming they're dead. If that crawled out near me while I was driving, my reaction would probably end in me either throwing myself out the door or flipping my car and turning it into a crashing fireball on the side of the road. Or both. Having your bedroom life almost completely die immediately after getting married was pretty surreal. I never thought it would happen to me and just sort of assumed it was more of a joke people liked to make. I never thought a person could change so quickly and so drastically. I was severely depressed pretty much ever since I can remember. At 17-ish, I dropped out of high school and I joined the National Guard and went through infantry school, thinking it would make me tougher and stronger. I planned to get a college education with the benefits. Well, they gave me no money for school, so I paid out of pocket, and I never went to class, so I dropped out. I did nothing. For most of my childhood, my dad was making a lot of money, 4-year degree from a prestigious school, and then a law degree from another prestigious school. My mum had 2 degrees as well. We lived very well for a while, but now my dad is jobless, my parents split up, and I live with my mum and little sister. I figured if they couldn't succeed in life, how could I? Well, now I'm on my way. I don't make a ton of money, but I make a decent amount for someone living at home with no expenses. I'm 21. I started an internship with an old business friend of my dad's, meaning to learn a little about IT. I figured I could do the dirty work in exchange for some knowledge. Well, my dad's friend liked me, as did all of my co-workers. They offered me a full-time position. I get up every morning, I get dressed, and I go to work at my desk. Most people abhor the idea of wearing a suit and sitting at a desk, but I love it. I feel good. There have been some bumps. My girlfriend of 2 years left me. I fell back into a small episode of not treating myself well, but I'm holding in there. We used to spend every day together. Now you know what I do? I go to the gym, I work on computers. I just built my first gaming PC yesterday, actually. I don't see my mum cry because we can't afford oil for heat, or because she can't give my sister lunch money. Life is stable and it's on an upward path. Every day gets a little better. I get a little stronger, a little bigger. I learn a little more and I get closer and closer to success. So that's my I never thought it would happen to me experience. I never thought I'd be happy. Teachers. How easy is it to tell if a student has a crush on another? And what interesting moments between the two can you share?
High school teacher. Depending on the kids' personalities, they either get louder or quieter when their crushes are present. The loud ones are frickin' annoying. The quiet ones are the ones I would say purposefully sit next to their crushes. Oh god, I just realized that my 66-year-old GOV teacher totally knows.
Teenagers are not subtle by nature, but they are amazingly oblivious when it comes to matters of the heart. They are really perceptive with other things, though. The boys almost never recognize if a girl likes them, and the girl never realizes that the guy is showing interest. It's funny to watch it happen. It's so blatantly obvious as an outsider, but I remember being just as oblivious as a student.
It's called crushing self-doubt. I had a girl literally ask me out, and I slept on it and convinced myself she was just screwing with me in an attempt to embarrass me. Oh, similar to me, there was a girl me and my friends all liked in primary school. I said no in case they had bad intent. What if a girl was just too shy to find out herself?
Back in 5th grade, I had a crush on a girl named Jenny. She was sweet and I really liked her, even if, innocently. Since this was 5th grade in the elementary school, I was in Boy Scouts with her brother, and my best friend told said brother that I had a crush on his sister, and he apparently passed it along to Jenny. Toward the end of the school year, she hands me a folded-up note telling me not to read it until after I got home. I waited like 5 minutes and popped that sucker open, and it's basically a confession that her brother told me that I liked her, but that he sometimes lies to her, and she just wanted me to check either yes or no. I was so embarrassed that her brother told her that I just ignored the letter completely. Oof. Well, to be honest, I know people who aren't much better attuned as grown adults either. I am completely oblivious to signals, as are a lot of my friends of all genders. Awkward story. My students are all between 8 and 10, and a few have noticeably hit the point where they're obviously starting to notice the opposite sex. I have 2 students that I'll give fake names. A boy, James, and a girl, Lucy, in my class. They're always together, recess, lunchtime, free choice, and the two are always working together. They're both very shy and giggly, and it seemed a mutual crush was there, noted by me and their math teacher as well. One day I hear James getting teased by some other kids for his crush on Lucy. His math teacher and I pull him aside and have a talk with him. We tell him that we'll be talking with the class as a whole about crushes and teasing. He's not the only one. His math teacher also tells him that if he does have a crush on Lucy, it's nothing to be embarrassed about because she's a nice, sweet girl. James just looks awkward and asks to go, so we let him. A few days later, I'm walking my kids out to the parent pickup and I see Lucy's dad is here to pick her up. James waves to both of them as they leave and I ask if he's been over to Lucy's house to play and if he knows her dad.
Yeah, miss, that's my uncle.
Oh, crap. I've encouraged cousin love. I awkwardly gather my nerves to say,
so you remember that talk we had about Lucy and liking her? Well, I didn't realize she was your cousin. Yeah, I thought you didn't. That was weird, miss.
Then he just laughed and said he liked a different girl anyway in his older sister's class. In conclusion, 10-year-old is into cougars, not cousins. Oh man, the longing stares across the room, the almost wistful what-ifs you can just see in their eyes. When I was in middle school, that was me. Fortunately, the girls in the bar after 1:30 are usually drunk and desperate too.
Not really. I close down the local bar about once a week. I'm happily married but friends with one of the bartenders, so I hang out until our shift is over if there are sketchy people, and there are almost always sketchy people. It's like the old saying, the odds are good, but the goods are odd. I had a toothless dude and his wife sit down next to me. She literally had a bandaged head wound, and he asked me for a threesome, so she wouldn't have to die not knowing a woman's touch. Computer science/computational physics university lecturer here. Men tend to outnumber women 10 to 1 in my lecture groups. odd scenarios. My favorite being 4 of my students simultaneously being exceedingly into the same exceedingly pretty woman, who was in the realms of shy but unremittingly kind. She also happened to be a lesbian. I knew this and they did not. Of course, only 2 people could sit next to her in a lecture theater, and an actual friend of hers usually took one of those spots. So the 4 of them would try to play it cool as she sat down, and then desperately try to get as close as possible without giving the game away. Like a single round of musical chairs where only one person can win, but there's definitely never going to be a prize any of the players want. It's important to also be aware that these were nerds of the highest order, so at a certain point they were just running and shoving one another, charging down the aisle like the adults they apparently were. I was eventually forced to intervene and end the game when one of them, honest to God, vaulted a row of seats and nearly landed on another student. They deliberately avoided her after I pulled them aside, which was probably great for her, but terrible for me. I found their fruitless game a never-ending source of comedy. I'm a substitute teacher, and my favorite student with a blatant crush experience was with a 2nd grade class. I picked the kids up from the yard after recess, and a boy came to me very upset because one of the girls had been chasing him the entire recess. Once we got back to class, I talked with the girl asking for her side of the story. Conversation went something like this. Me. Jose was pretty upset about something that happened this recess. Do you want to tell me what happened? Girl. We were playing. He said you were chasing him. Is that true? Slight blush. Yeah. Do you think he wanted you to be chasing him? No. If you knew he didn't want to be chased, why were you chasing him? Huge blush, guilty smile, and hunched shoulders. He makes me laugh. It's funny how something that would be completely creepy and unacceptable in the realm of grown adults seems so cute when it's between little kids. Don't know what that says about us. I worked in the kindergarten for a brief period between high school and uni, and there were a couple of little 5-year-old girls who just walked up to the boys they decided they liked and kissed them forcefully, informing them that they were now their husbands. But the one that sticks to mind is the little 2.5-year-old from my group. She spoke only a little at the time and didn't bother much with learning the names of the grown-ups to any extent, but shortly before I left, they hired a really young guy, about 19, as an assistant. The girl sees him walking into the ward for the first time and just freezes. She actually dropped her toy and her eyes go round like saucers, her jaw dropping. It was both adorable and absolutely hilarious to watch. We introduced him and none of the kids were that fussed, but she just stood there, mouthing his name, whispering it to herself a few times to make sure she got it right. He sat down on the playmat with her and she couldn't take her eyes off him. She offered him a toy which he accepted gracefully, and I swear she lost her breath. From then on, she loved him. She was quite shy to begin with, walking up to him at times, saying his name, and then when she got his attention, she would giggle uncontrollably, blushing bright red, and run away. If he took sick days or didn't come in till late, she would get sort of depressed and not want to play much. All the kids played favorites with the assistants, little boys have their crushes and so on, but this one was a little different. It was as if she had decided he was her soulmate. He was so kind to her, and the kind of relationship they had was never anything that made you think anything creepy. He just couldn't bear to reject her. In the afternoons, he'd read to the kids for as long as they were willing to sit still and listen, and she always made sure to be the one to sit on his lap or next to him to flip the pages. I'm teaching 7th grade right now. It's crazy easy to tell. It makes me wonder if I was that oblivious when I was their age, or worse, if there were girls that were obvious towards me and I didn't notice. It's like they don't even hide it. One of my boys carries a girl's books every day. It's clear to me that he has a crush on her. I learned recently that she has a different one of these guys to carry her books between every class. I mean, that's just manipulative. She's got to know, right? Maybe, maybe not. As clueless as these guys are that carrying books isn't some grand romantic gesture, she may be just as unaware that's why they're doing it. Girlfriends do that stuff for each other all the time. We borrow and lend and carry and hide and all of that. So a guy doing that is basically doing friendship stuff from her perspective. Also, we pay attention to each other a lot. We notice if there's a new haircut or sweater or she's lost weight and all that. That's normal everyday behavior, especially for teenage girls. I've got a 9th grader and I've seen her around some of the guys in her orchestra. They bring her music over, ask with fixed and nervous smiles how she's doing today, sit next to her at picnics and stuff. One of them even asked her to get my recipe for baked beans. And you've got to be desperate for conversation when baked beans recipe seems to be the logical choice. But when I asked if there's any guys into her, she shrugged and says, "Nah, boys don't really notice me." I finally sat down and was like, "Look, I don't want you spilling this or embarrassing them, but Todd, Joe, and Mike, not real names, all like you. They can't come out and say it, but they are interested in you.
Do whatever you want with that knowledge, but you should know what the signs of interest look like. And I laid it out for her. She honestly had no idea what low-key stuff looks like, because movies and all that are always big sweeping gestures, not quietly jockeying for a seat as fourth chair if you're second, so they can sit next to you, or having your eyes way too wide open, or talking to you about some quite banal things just to talk to you. Not that I'm saying guys should all be super romantic and swing for the fences, but a huge number of dudes didn't realize they'd been flirted with over the years. Girls have the same problem. We're not exactly speaking two different languages, but we're sure as hell working from different subtexts. I'll say again, this is just confirming to me that a lot of adults are barely more evolved than kids in how they behave when it comes to matters of the heart. I have this one teacher that will totally just say anything that's on her mind. Once she just flat out said, "Do you guys like each other or what?" to these two kids in my class. Within 3 days, they were dating and still are. That could have just as easily resulted in them being super embarrassed and avoiding each other forever. I know a teacher who did this all of the time. She paired kids together so much in her mind that she was obsessed with getting two kids together. Once there was this girl who liked to hang out with this guy in her class. The very first day she asked if they were dating, and the girl just said no because she had a boyfriend, and they were very happy. For weeks, the teacher would ask if her and her boyfriend had broken up yet, so that her and this other guy could date. Eventually, the girl told her to stop because rumors were starting to spread around the school. Then the day came when the teacher asked and the girl just ran out of the room crying because her boyfriend actually broke up with her. Her and the other boy never got together, but it was funny to see my sister give our teacher the death stare for making her feel bad, even when the teacher told her to stop because it was making her uncomfortable. Band in high school is a funny place. Since kids are around each other a lot more of the time than the average student, they tend to get band goggles. It's pretty obvious to see relationships blossoming. More often than not, it's a good thing, but every now and again you get the older upperclassmen boys going after naive freshman girls. And boy oh boy, does that turn ugly quick. The drama can be outrageous. Funniest, most shocking moment, a girl who's an awesome student had been dating a true player on and off for the last year. She went so far to tell me that she got back together with him after he cheated on her. So literally last Friday, I'm sitting in the band hall watching the kids practice. This sweet girl comes into the hall and is walking with a sense of purpose. As she passes me, she says something under her breath that I didn't quite get the first time. Confused by what she said, I watch her walk up to the guy. She grabs him by the shoulders and spins him around. She says something to which he responds with a short answer, but had that look on his face that he got caught doing something he wasn't supposed to be doing. She then balls up her fists and socks the guy 4 to 5 times and then storms off. At that point, I realized that what she said was, "Teacher, you're gonna have to write me an office referral." Best referral ever. I teach English. I remember a star football player, senior, coming into the room to rap with me for a bit before the third period start every Friday. In my third period, a female student, junior, of mine, who was extremely intelligent and very pretty, yet somewhat shy being an AP student and all, was sitting in the front row and always stared at him when he came in. He would talk about football and stuff with me, and every so often I'd look back at her still staring right at him and smiling the entire time. She would not turn that smile off no matter who was looking or what anyone said. It was actually one of the cutest/saddest things I've ever seen, seeing as how the guy never even turned around to notice her. If he did, who knows, maybe they would have hit it off. Maybe they did after they weren't my students. Is no one going to question that a football player rapped with you during school? Do you teach at East High? Okay, after 5 people writing me to tell me the meaning of the word rap, I think that no one needed to. At the very least, you guys should have just seen I was making a pop culture reference. Former 6th grade teacher here, I was here to witness one of my kids take his first big leap, at lunch. He asked the girl he had a crush on, "Will you go on a date with me?" She smiled and said yes. Immediately, the boy on the other side of her said, "Don't go out with this screwbag, go out with me." She smiled and said okay. He was pretty shattered for the rest of the week. He was in the same class as the girl, so there was a lot of longing looks and wistful sighs. I'm pretty sure that's the kind of thing you remember forever. Middle school is tough, man. I wasn't a teacher. I was a teacher helper? I mean, it was only 6th grade, but it was extremely easy. Looking at everyone facing you, you start to realize what people are focusing on. I know when kids are texting because they look straight at me and every 2 minutes look down for 2 seconds and have their hands under the table. For a crush, it is the long stares at the back of their crush's head while fiddling with an object like the pencil or their hair. As a quick look away when the crush looks at them, it's easy. God damn, how many of our teachers were chuckling under their breath watching our antics at school? Anyone else wondering? Oh, it's painfully obvious most of the time. Here are some things I saw. Continuous glances at the same person. Body language that positions the person closer to the other person. Interjecting into a conversation that the person was not engaged in to begin with. Being helpful more so for that person than for anyone else in class. Flirting, obviously. Boastful storytelling. A lot of times it's outlandish and very obviously untrue. Hanging around the other person uninvited. And checking out the other person while oblivious to their surroundings. What's funny is that most people think they're being sneaky or inconspicuous. From my vantage point in the front of the classroom, these things seem so obvious as to be genuinely painful to observe. It was especially painful when the feelings were intentionally unreciprocated. I taught in college for a bit, if you're wondering. I'm not a teacher, but in 6th grade, 2002, a girl in my class, history with Mrs. Thompson, sat in the next row over from me every day. I was crushing on another girl and ignorant of the fact that she liked me. Midwinter, Mrs. Thompson is handing back papers and stops between the two of us while glancing back and forth and says something along the lines of, "I don't know who to give this paper back to." She says the girl's first name, or Mr., my last name. Mrs. Thompson hands the paper back to her. She'd been practicing writing her name with my last name so much in her notebook, apparently like many teenage girls do, that she had accidentally written it on her homework when she handed it in. 6 years later, at my high school graduation, a half dozen of my former teachers, including Mrs. Thompson, were sitting around talking with my friends and me and brought up that paper where a girl had written my last name on her paper. They found it cute and endearing and told other various stories of middle school love. A year and a half ago, I married that girl. College perspective. I can usually tell which of my students have hooked up. I can almost always tell when the girls are crushing on guys in my classes. It's usually painfully obvious, especially from the perspective of the front of the room. I can also tell that you're texting, no matter how much you work to camouflage it. Sometimes when I assign group work of any kind, I like to intentionally split up or subvert the secret lovebirds, just to see how they react. I'm a bit of a sadist like that. Oh, freshmen, all pheromones, alcohol, romantic overconfidence, and a complete lack of experience with the real world. So much fun. I work in college and teach early morning classes to 17 to 24-year-olds, mostly. It's painfully obvious who just did a walk of shame to class and occasionally who's screwing someone else in the room. The most awkward thing that ever happened was some guy who came into the class and interrupted a lecture to hit on a girl in the front row. He wasn't even a student, just some idiot who walked by our open campus and recognized the girl through the window as the girl who he saw at Jack in the Box a week earlier. He comes in and just starts talking to her. I'm in such shock that this guy just randomly walked in that I was speechless and just stood there watching it. After about a minute, I came to my senses and realized the situation. Here's this 40-plus-year-old dude, tatted up with his pants hanging from his butt, reeking of booze and cigarettes at 9 a.m., hitting on a very uncomfortable-looking tiny blonde, 18 years old. I told him this is my classroom and that I wouldn't have him interrupting. He would have to go. He didn't put up a fight, he just asked when the class was over so he could come back to mac him some. I told him we were out at noon. We were really done by 10, and that was the last day of class. The day of the final, a week later, on a different room, I kept my eyes open, but he never showed. I asked the student, but she only knew him from a single instance of standing in line in front of him at Jack in the Box. I teach 16-year-olds. When a girl likes a guy, she'll draw hearts on his notes. When a guy likes a girl, he'll draw male anatomy on her notes. That might be the greatest thing I've read in this collection of stories. A couple met in my high school chemistry classroom. This was 3 years ago. He was a junior in high school, she was a sophomore. They told me last fall that when the date is set, I'll be invited to the wedding. Best example of chemistry ever. This actually happened in my acting class just today. Our teacher said he had an exercise to show us how much subtext there is under the surface of our actions. Pick a person in here who you have something you desperately want to say something to and never could. Think about it really hard and don't make eye contact with them or they'll know. Everyone in this class knows each other very well. There's a lot of dirt to stir up. The silence was deep and uncomfortable. Now, go ahead and say it. You could hear their buttholes pucker. People looked numb with fear and hesitation. The teacher, having proved his point about rich subtext, opened his mouth to end the exercise before anyone could actually speak. Now, just then a kid jumped up from his chair arduously and let loose with, "Sadie, you're hot as hell and I want to frick your brains out." The room exploded. The result was pandemonium. One kid was laughing so hard he nearly tipped his desk right over onto the floor. The teacher was in shock. The kid was red in the face and laughing uneasily. The amazing thing was the girl. She didn't smile, didn't acknowledge it, nothing. She just sat there, stock still, like Marie Antoinette at the guillotine, totally above the situation. I think she must have been mortified and didn't know what to do. The teacher's response: "I have been doing that exercise for decades, and no one has ever actually said anything." The next day, and I crap you not, I saw this kid and Sadie walk in, a little apart, both grinning. He was listening to a song on her iPod. They both fell asleep in class. Great success. Medical professionals. What's something ridiculous you've had to explain to your patients? Story from 2015. To an 84-year-old man with a candlestick in his rectum. That you don't need to massage your prostate with a candle once a month. A doctor had apparently told him 15 years ago to do this, and he had not questioned it since. I was gonna say, well, it was a different time, but then I realized 15 years ago was the year 2000. September changed a lot of things, man. Firefighter/EMT here. Just because you're taking medication for something doesn't mean it's going to go away. Here's a real conversation that happens about once or twice per shift at minimum. Me. Do you have any medical history, diseases, sicknesses, and/or conditions I should be aware of? Patient. No. Are you currently taking or supposed to be taking any medications? Yeah, I'm on insert 12 different medications here. Ah, I see one of your medications is metformin. Are you a diabetic? Not anymore. I just told you I take meds for it. Me. Sigh. I had to explain to my 75-year-old grandmother that there isn't one straight tube connecting your ears. She put eardrops in, put cotton in her other ear before she laid down so it wouldn't leak out the other side. Those instructions must have gone in one ear and out the other. Having to explain that I can't figure out what's wrong with them over the phone. My mom called me and asked me what the rash on her elbow was. After 5 minutes of trying to explain that I needed to see the rash, I finally asked her what she thought of the shirt I was wearing. Took her a couple of seconds to figure it out. I mean, that's just a special level of ignorance right there. In the words of Ron Burgundy, I'm not even angry, I'm impressed. You're more likely to die from a dental abscess than dental x-rays. Dr. Oz is full of crap. I also hate it when people say, well, if they're so safe, then why do you step out of the room? And they act like it's fricking stumped me. The reason I step out of the room when taking x-rays is because I do that almost every day. You get it once every 3 years. I don't know if this is a good analogy, but you equate it to a bartender asked to share his drink with a customer. You can have a drink every once in a while, but if the bartender has to drink with every customer, he'd be very sick. Overweight lady with some liver damage. Had many conversations about diet and reducing alcohol intake. Patient had cut out whiskey and vodka, but did not know that Guinness had alcohol. Yes, this was in rural Ireland. About no alcohol. Alright, I'll just stick to Guinness then. No, that has alcohol in it. Really? But what about stout? Porter? IPA? Lager? Ale? Cider? My personal favourites are when the families of a loved one bring in food that's completely counter to their current medical condition. Off the top of my head, I've had a family bring in a get-well cake to their dad, who was on his 5th or 6th admission to DKA, diabetic ketoacidosis. He was still on an insulin infusion, and the family didn't see the problem with giving him a cake because he woke up and was hungry. I've had families order in pizza to have a pizza party when their parent is admitted on the cardiology ward and on a salt and fluid restricted diet due to extensive heart failure. Good times. When I had my appendix removed, every fricking body brought me food. I had to go a week without anything, and they kept bringing me food. Returning visitors, food again. Only one person brought me a book to actually pass the time. I was crying and giving the food away, and crying and giving it away. It was awful. It is hard-coded into our DNA, I suppose. Just like every grandma resolves every situation with food, thus we are bound to go down the same road. Am diabetic. I have a family that does these things. I tell them, no, I can't eat that. They insist that I can have a little bit, right? Hand me a huge slice of cake. No, I can't even eat a little bit. They try to make me feel guilty for not eating the cake they brought me. I have specific instructions now when I'm at the hospital. I'm currently under medical quarantine. I cannot be disturbed. It's weird to pretend to have MRSA. Medical professional here. Have many stories that fit the bill. One that sticks in my mind is a patient, 15-year-old kid that suffered a traumatic head injury, was in the ICU barely able to speak,
obvious cognitive impairments due to the injury, and the family was strictly instructed to refrain from feeding him anything. Nothing by mouth, no water, nothing. The next morning, I get an emergency page from the ICU because the patient is going into respiratory failure. I rush over to see the pulmonologist and nursing staff performing CPR on the kid. The parents are outside the room, freaking out. Sadly, the kid didn't make it. Upon the autopsy, they pulled out a pepperoni slice, crust, and green jello from the kid's lungs. It was devastating as hell to tell the kid's parents that they killed him by sneaking him in food. The kid's throat muscles were so weakened by the brain injury that most of the food was ending up in his lungs. The parents thought that the medical team wasn't feeding him for yucks. The only way they could convey their love for him at this time was to give him foods he loved. Tragic lesson learned, I hope. That was pretty upsetting. I can't even imagine living with the knowledge of what happened. Let the rest of us know not to do this, folks. Paramedic friend of mine has had to explain to multiple people that diabetes is not something that everyone ends up getting in life. When a woman lets her diabetic son eat ridiculous amounts of sugar, then gets him to run around in the yard to burn it all off because I don't like pumping him full of all that insulin. That's not how this works, lady. Shadowed a dentist in a rural area where most patients were in poverty. One guy was so confused on why his teeth were rotting. He revealed that his diet consisted of sugar, and alcohol. The dentist had to explain sugar can lead to enamel loss. The guy said, "Nope, that's a lie. My wife is a dentist and had a similar patient tell her that it wasn't the sugar but the fluoride in the water that causes decay." I was in hospital with my girlfriend while the nurse undressed her. The nurse asked if it was all right for me to be in there. She knew we were together, and we said yes with a confused look. She then told us the story of a couple in their 80s who were in, and when she took down the wife's top to check her heartbeat, the husband covered his eyes and ran out of the room while the wife burst into tears. 40+ years of marriage, and they'd never seen each other in the nude. That's sad. Really, really frickin' sad. Taking a medication twice a day does not mean taking the doses together. 1 dose now, 1 dose later. Not both doses now. On a side note, don't give your son your sleeping medication. Ever. I remember in a country doctor's notebook, this young doctor who had just started in rural Russia, initially with no clue what the frick he was doing, and making it up as he went along for some stuff, had a patient with an infection of some sort. The guy was very smart and he enjoyed having an intellectual conversation with him, gave him the pills and sent him on his way. Then, a few days later, he saw the same guy in for a med OD. He said, "It was going to take weeks taking those pills, so I decided to just take them all at once and be done with it." A side note, this was adapted into a short series starring Jon Hamm and Daniel Radcliffe and is available on Netflix, called A Young Doctor's Notebook. It's really great. Radcliffe does a great job as the doctor. Repeat patient of the STD clinic I work at. "Isn't there something I can buy, like over the counter, so I don't have to keep coming back in for chlamydia?" Me. "Contraceptive?" Dirty patient. "Nah, miss, I meant like a tea or something." When the doctors or nurses tell you it's a very bad idea to leave AMA or against medical advice, you should take their advice. Several years ago when I was a phlebot, a person who drew blood, I went to the nursing station so I could grab someone to follow me into the room. The patient was given a clot-busting drug, TPA. This stuff makes heparin look like child's play, and I would need to have a nurse hold pressure on the puncture site for at least 5 to 10 minutes to see if it had stopped bleeding in that time. The nurse told me stone-faced that they left AMA. After that drug, falling down could cause serious injury because you just don't clot at all. He was back in ER a short while later. Another lady decided that even though she was in the ICU, that since she got 4 units of blood and felt much better, it'd be okay for her to go ahead and leave. No, it's not okay. That's stupid. In nursing school, my labor and delivery teacher was covering contraceptives and demonstrated how to show patients how male contraceptives are used by putting them on our thumb. At the end of it, she emphasized, "Make sure you tell them that it doesn't actually go on their thumb, and that the way you put it on a thumb is how it should be placed on someone's manhood." I had a patient that was truly concerned that his cancer was contagious. He wanted to know how to keep his puppy from contracting it. He was literally more concerned about his tiny puppy getting cancer because of him than his own health. I'll never forget the joy and relief I saw in his eyes when I told him he could have all the puppy cuddles he wanted. For those of you wondering, the puppy cuddles were curative, of course. Aw man, that's super sweet. Dumb as heck, but still super sweet. For the purposes of surgery, vodka is not a clear liquid. I have been lied to by every one of my Russian homeopathic instructors, and I am going to demand a refund. Ooh, I have another one. I'm a nurse in general surgery. My patient had a note in her chat to not let her have any of the cups in the room, which I thought was strange. We've had other orders before for other patients saying they weren't allowed to have any metal utensils. The patient loved to swallow spoons and forks, but that's another story. But this was something new. I quickly found out why when I walked into her room for a morning report, and several cups of urine were sitting on her sink. Apparently, she was too lazy to get out of bed to pee, so she had her husband sneak in some more cups to conveniently pee in. No, peeing in a cup is not allowed. This happened multiple times after multiple talks with the patient, hence the order. Since I'm getting a lot of requests for the spoon dude, unfortunately it's not a very exciting story. He was a young gentleman in his late 20s and early 30s who came somewhat frequently to our floor for retrieving silverware from wherever it got stuck in his GI tract. Some people eat paper or laundry soap. His thing was swallowing cutlery. Once he downed several knife handles. How did he get the handles off? What drew him to these particular knives? After he ate one, what did it feel like to continue swallowing the others? So many questions. All meals were supervised for his visits. The catheter in your wang makes it feel like you have to pee, but you don't, it does it for you. No, don't just pull it out, you'll shred your bladder and seriously regret it. You're screaming right now because you're trying to pull out your catheter, please stop. No, don't throw your pee bag at me, you'll be arrested for assault. Sincerely, hospital security. A few years ago, I was taking care of a woman from a rural part of our state. She had just been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and it wasn't looking good. Her husband was kind of keeping his distance from her. As I was doing something in the corner of the room, he came up to me and whispered, "I can still kiss her, right?" I then had to explain that cancer is indeed not contagious and he won't catch her cancer. It was kind of heartbreaking. Oh man. Number 1. Soda has sugar. I had a diabetic man who didn't realize this. I just don't understand how it was even possible to not know this as a grown adult. He was a completely normal person otherwise, which is why it had me asking, WTF? Number 2. Pouring Lysol on your diabetic foot ulcer won't keep it from getting infected. Number 3. When we said clear liquids only, like Jell-O, water and popsicles, we did not mean that you should convince your mother to blend you some McDonald's burgers and fries so you can drink that through a straw. Number 4. Unless you've already done it at least once before, pushing a baby out of your hoo-ha will neither be a pleasant nor quick experience. Had a couple that had been trying to get pregnant for over a year without success. Turns out they did the deed once and were waiting. Per our professor, she was counseling a couple and was starting to consider doing fertility tests before it came out that the couple were using protection every single time. Probably to all our benefit. Yeah, that's like a non-lethal Darwin Award. When you were told not to eat 12 hours prior to surgery, it wasn't a polite suggestion. We had a patient coming in who we told not to eat or drink anything, even water. So he drank Gatorade since we told him he couldn't have water. I worked in an ER and saw this more than once. Last case, parents brought their child in for surgery, let her eat a full breakfast because she was hungry. She vomited aspirated bacon and eggs and ended up in the ICU on a ventilator so they could irrigate all the food out of her lungs. How did the parents react? Were they shocked, or was it more like, yeah, we done messed up? They were devastated. They realized they'd made a horrible mistake. It's easy to blame them, but honestly, the average person doesn't fully grasp how dangerous surgery actually is. With the county corollary of, no, you can't smoke crystal just before surgery. I bet being an anesthesiologist is a great time. Sir, do you want to wake up halfway through your surgery? Please frickin' listen to me. I shouldn't be surprised, but the amount of people who just don't pay any attention to the medical professionals caring for them is mind-boggling. From the junkies to the idiots who believe they're homeopaths and think they know more after one bullcrap article. An executive came in once complaining of bumps on her tongue. She was worried they might be cancer. I got to write my favorite encounter note thus far in my career. Complaint. Bumps on tongue. Asymptomatic. Exam. Taste buds. Assessment. Taste buds. Plan? Reassure. I'm a medical student, and earlier this year I was taking a history from a patient during a bedside tutorial where a senior doctor takes a group of us to see a patient together. I was speaking to this man about his symptoms and used the correct word for male organ. Begins with a P, to which he gave me a confused look. I said it again and he still didn't know what I was talking about. I ended up having to ask him if he had any pain in his Johnson while peeing in front of my classmates and my tutor. Keep in mind that this guy was in his 40s.
I don't work in a medical profession, but I do work in another place where terrible diseases run rampant and staff spend every waking moment fighting them off. A school. There was nothing more bizarre than explaining germ theory to a teacher. She honestly didn't believe that such a thing could exist. She sincerely believed that sicknesses were caused by negative energy and bad auras, and insisted that it was fundamentally impossible for something as small as a germ to harm something as large as a human body, if something that small could even be alive in the first place. She spouted off something about how a creature that small would be incapable of living for more than a few seconds because energy can only get so small, and a germ, she did finger quotes, could only hold energy to live for 1 or 2 seconds at most. These are the people educating your kids. For everyone asking what she taught, grades 1 to 3. Not exactly the kind of place I'd worry about her voodoo even needing to be brought up, but it shook my faith in her ability to be objective about other things, so I'm still uncertain. I mean, imagine if she was convincing an entire class of 3rd graders that they do not need to wash their hands. Caring for a woman in her 80s, I had to explain to her that you don't pee out of your hoo-ha. There is, in fact, another hole. I'm a veterinarian and I don't understand owners sometimes. I work at a clinic of a vet who's also a private animal nutritionist, so sometimes we do house calls for special cases. Client Bob's dog isn't eating well and he has no clue why. I go over and ask him to show me his feeding routine for his dog. He fills a bowl with kibble and the dog seems super excited to eat. I crap you not, he then goes over to the fridge, takes out the ketchup and drenches the kibble with ketchup. By this point, my jaw is hanging open in shock, and I can see that the dog has suddenly lost its enthusiasm for the meal. I ask Bob politely what he's doing, and he tells me that his entire family has ketchup on every meal. I then spend the next 15 minutes explaining to him that his dog may not like ketchup on its food. Now the dog eats great, and apparently I'm a miracle worker. I work at a vet clinic on weekends, and the amount of junk people feed their pets on a regular basis is astounding. I kid you not, we had a lady board her dog with us for the weekend. She bought toys, treats, bedding, even though we have our own and prefer to use that in case theirs is damaged or lost, but no food. Not a problem, we have food here and we even have tricks to make them eat, like putting some canned ID with their food. She gives our receptionist $40 and says, "Here's the money for his chicken McNuggets. He likes those. Feed him 10 pieces a day." The receptionist flat out told this woman no and even bought the vet out to explain why we would not do that at our facility. I totally thought that the story was going to be dog won't eat kibble, owner doesn't understand why, turns out dog has been eating 3-course meals with owner, but he hasn't eaten his food for days. That's actually not too far off from what I see sometimes. Family will feed their dog copious amounts of table scraps and then wonder why he never touches the dog food. And why he has pancreatitis. And now, back to human beings, folks. Sticking the blade of a steak knife in your butt won't cure your constipation. I really wish this was a joke. That just because you take medication that controls your ailments, it doesn't mean you don't have them anymore. I ask plenty of older people if they have any medical history and frequently get "no" as an answer, only to look at their med list and find out that they're on a dozen medications. Why do you take this blood pressure medication? Oh, because I used to have high blood pressure. Nope, not how it works. That yes, guys can be nurses too. I'm a guy and a nurse. No, I'm not a doctor. Yes, maybe I should have been a doctor instead. Or maybe a woman should be a doctor instead if she likes it more. Paramedic here. I had to tell a 19-year-old that she needed to change her tampon more than once a month. She was in septic shock, by the way. I'm a guy. Even I know you've got to change that crap out. My sister is an ER doctor in Chicago. She once had to explain to a Mormon couple on their wedding night how to do the deed. The 19-year-old man had taken his 18-year-old bride into the ER, convinced his wife didn't have a hoo-ha. She also had to tell a mother of 4 that giving your children a heavy dose of vodka did not kill the bacteria in their bodies when they got colds. She also had to report that, obviously. She found a very frightened 23-year-old girl who came into the ER very afraid because she had found a growth in her crotch. It was her pleasure button. When my sister was asking her how she had never noticed it before, the girl responded, "My mom told me that if I touched my area, that the devil would get me." The girl had lived for 23 years without ever touching or seeing her own hoo-ha. I guess when she would wipe, she would just blot the outside quickly or something? A female patient came in and told the doctor that she'd been bleeding every month down there, thinking it had something to do with the birth of her daughter. Yeah, I can't emphasize enough the importance of teaching this stuff in schools. Two things. One is to take all the medication even if you feel better at day 3. And 2, you do not give your kid the leftover medication from part 1 when he has the same symptoms a week later. Wanting someone to make you a cup of tea is not a good reason to call an ambulance. For everyone asking, yes, I made the tea. After a half-hour blue light run, might as well. Left to my own devices, I wouldn't have made that tea. I was a student at the time and was told to do so by my mentor. In the UK, social care is part of our remit, so it kind of makes sense. I work in a hospital. I was getting some history from this lady when she told me she was allergic to epinephrine, i.e. adrenaline. You know, the stuff in EpiPens that you give to people when they have an allergic reaction to stop anaphylaxis reaction. So I asked her what reaction she had last time she was given epinephrine, and she told me that it made her heart race, and she couldn't settle down. Had to explain to her that that means it worked. People who've outrun the cops. How did you do it? Don't know if this counts, but my friend and I were busted for being 19 and 20 and drinking at a party. Everyone ran, but I hid and they ended up never finding me. I spent an entire 7 hours pretzeling in a woven basket in a closet, wide awake and slowly sobering. The scariest part was when they started searching said closet right after the bust and the cop moved clothes from above my head to reveal my hair and still didn't see me. Good times. Got to love the differences between the US and the UK. Busted for drinking at 19 and 20 in a private residence. I was a baby-faced 15-year-old drinking a pint in a pub. Police officer came in, told me to finish my pint and go home. They let you finish for the greater good. The greater good. The greater good. There were a lot of people and I was faster than 50% of them. Just like my zombie apocalypse plan. The benefit of smoking green herb in a forest and getting caught is that you're in a forest. We just took off. Hard to catch up when there's all kinds of crap to avoid. Personally, I don't rate my survival odds as being very high running through a forest at night while high on green herb, but I'm glad it worked for you. Hanging out at a friend's house when my mum texts me to inform me that my girlfriend is on her way back from college to surprise me. My girlfriend hated the dude I was hanging out with, so I didn't tell her I was there and recently told her I was home. I jump in the car and started flying home on a road that I should definitely not be flying on. As God fated, I pass a cop and I see him hit his brakes in my rear view. I instinctively floor it over the hill, pull into a parking lot and cut my lights off. Nighttime. Few seconds pass and I see him fly by with his wee-woos on. With no time to spare, I pull back out soon after and I finish flying home. Run inside, jerk my clothes off, lay on the couch, turn on the TV, and she knocks on the door not 5 seconds later. Mission accomplished. Wow, your mum is pretty fantastic for giving you a heads up. Mine would have thrown me under the bus immediately. She's a better wingman than my little brother. When I was younger, I was dating a girl at work. I had faked sick and called in on a Friday to go to a party, and for reasons I no longer remember 16 years after the fact, I didn't tell the girl. So I'm at the party and get a call from my buddy who tells me the girl heard I was sick and was on the way to my house to take care of me and bring soup. I rushed home and my little brother was the only one there, so I tell him, "Look, this girl is going to be here any minute and she thinks I'm sick, so just roll with it, okay?" I heard the doorbell from my room and prepared to put on my sick act. After laying in bed for 20 minutes, I go upstairs to see what's going on. I ask my brother what happened and he said, "I just told her you were sick, so go away." On my way to a concert on a motorcycle, I was kinda racing on another bike up the highway. Went past a state boy at about 100 miles per hour and jumped off the next exit, the correct exit for the concert. Basically, I was able to get past the line of traffic into the event and scoot around a gate that was closed by riding on the footpath. Made my way to an area where there was literally 100 plus bikers. Ditched my helmet, removed the jacket and sat on a picnic table while they went around and around looking for me. So not so much outran, but outplayed. Thankfully, they never got close enough to read my plate. I was leaving town heading out into the country on my Triumph, probably cruising at around 80. Pass a sheriff sitting on his little gravel drive. I figured, screw it, immediately downshifted and slammed the throttle open. By the time he hits his lights, I'm doing like 120 and climbing, and he must have figured out it wasn't worth the time because he just shut them back off. Didn't even shift out of park, I don't think. On foot versus a cop car. Ran halfway into a residential block through backyards, aware that they saw which direction I went. Once they were out of sight, I doubled back and ran half into the block in the opposite direction. Sat quietly in a bush. They circled a few times and left that block. I didn't do anything, just ran when a cop car drove by. I was a bored kid.
My two buddies and I used to walk to a gas station at night when we were younger because they were 24/7 and sold huge burritos for $1. One of us was strangely afraid of the cops. One night we're walking and he sees a cop driving by and he immediately takes off in a sprint and hops a fence, leaving us awkwardly sitting out there with our burritos. The cop stops and was like, We get our friend to come back and apologize for being weird. Cop tells him he's a strange kid and circles the block a few more times to make sure we get home okay. I remember being like 17 and a group of us went rabbit hunting at night. We would basically ride around the cane fields and shoot rabbits. We would be drinking and stuff, and considering there wasn't crap else to do, it's what we did. So we finish up our hunt and we're exiting the cane fields onto the main highway. It would take us about 10 minutes to get back to my friend's house, and considering there was like 8 of us in a single cab Chevy, a few were riding on the bed of the truck. We jump onto the highway and make it about a mile when a cop turns his lights on. My buddy immediately pulls over and the rest of us are hiding our booze. As soon as the truck stops, one of my friends jumps out the back of the truck, drives into the bayou, crosses it, and takes off running. The thing is that the cop was a friend of ours. He had graduated the year before and recognized the truck, knew what we were doing, and wanted to mess with us and see how many we killed. I didn't hear from my buddy that jumped out the back of the truck until next afternoon, when I asked him why he did that. He said it was because he had half a joint in his pocket. This was before pagers or cell phones were a thing, thus the delay in communication. Running into a woods from a bonfire party. Knew previously from running into the woods where the barbed wire fence was and how to get through it. The cop in the dark did not. He was 15 feet behind me, then 100 feet behind me real fast. Wasn't worth giving me the MIP, so he turned back after that. Yee-haw. If he had seen my face, I wouldn't have run. With my car, among everyone else's sitting there, I would have felt way too paranoid driving later. Oh, that sounds rough to be that cop. Maybe he wasn't so much giving up the chase as going to attend to his wounds. We escaped by running. Me and my friends who were on the cross-country team, we casually ran 2 miles away. We were drinking in a park. Once we took off, the cops gave chase for about 100 yards and figured, screw it. It wasn't exactly a badass escape, but it was funny as heck. I'm imagining the cops chasing you during a cross-country meet and them getting really exhausted. In a town with a small police force. Hid, then placed an anonymous call tipping the police off that we were back at the scene of the crime, so the officers following us would return there. I've silently dipped out of a group as the cops were fast approaching, but never had to actually outrun them. There's some telltale signs at a party the cops are going to be called within a half hour in all likelihood. When the beer runs out, when the furniture gets lit on fire, potato cannon fired at vehicles, someone dives out of a window to not be seen until the next week, axe-throwing contests and sword fighting while they let the pigs out in a suburban neighborhood down the street from the high school. Senior year of high school, the night before Halloween. My friend dressed as a banana and I dressed as a gorilla. I was going to chase him around campus during school on Halloween, so we decided to go for a quick test run around the neighborhood late at night. We ran around and the banana costume we made was holding up real nicely. We saw a car turning around at a cul-de-sac, so we decided to run past it and see the driver's reaction. About 20 feet away from it, we realized it was a cop car. We were out past curfew, and the cops really do nab you for that here. So we stopped in our tracks and book it for the nearest park. Cop follows. My friend, a cross-country runner, took off ahead of me in his banana suit far into the park, into a trail deep into the neighborhood. I, a chubby dude in a gorilla suit, was wheezing when I got to the park. There were some trees that were about as wide as me, so I take cover behind one of them. The cop shines his searchlight around, and I'm terrified he can see a piece of my suit sticking out from the tree. After what seems like an eternity, the cop finally turns off his light and leaves. Phew. My time to shine. I was 17 and dumb and on my way to a meeting a few towns over. Where I live is so flat that you can watch your dog run away for 3 days, so there are often long stretches of road in an open field. I was turning left onto a 2-lane highway when I saw these 2 cars blow past me, going the direction I was going, at least 90 miles per hour. I said, well, let's make this a convoy. I got up to about 120 to catch them up, and I was about with them when I saw a semi-truck coming in the opposite direction. I thought to myself, how boned would I be if there was a cop driving behind that semi? Sure as God's got sandals, there was a cop driving behind the semi. The first 2 cars passed, and I just saw his lights come on as I passed him. I thought, oh frick. Reckless OP, jail, I'm going to lose my license, I'm screwed. I start slowing down and reach into my wallet for my license when I see a house coming up on my right side on a small side street. There was a house and a 2-car garage off to the side. I slammed on my brakes and took the turn, and I pulled right into this perfect stranger's open garage like I own the place. I get out, shaking because I'm not out of the woods yet. I walk out of the garage and up to the front door of the house and knock. An old lady answers and I tell her I'm here to work on my car and asked if Jack was home. All BS. She said, "No, I'm sorry." I profusely apologized and turned around. Just then I saw the cop fly past the house in hot pursuit of the other two cars. I got back into my car and took the back roads for the rest of the trip. I've beaten them several times. One of those times was in a bad neighborhood. As soon as he swung on me, I pulled into the first driveway and went to the door and knocked. I told the person that answered the door that the cop coming down the road was going to pull me over for speeding, that I had a suspended driver's license and would give them $20 to act like they knew me and to let me in. The cop stopped in front of the house, but the guy let me in. I paid the guy the $20, bull-crapped around for about 20 minutes watching the Wheel of Fortune with him and his wife, then went on my merry way. A relatively small downtown area was coming into town at 45 miles per hour, and the cop was coming the other way, directly at me. I was probably doing about 20 miles per hour over the limit, and he lit my butt up with a radar gun. He passed me, and I saw him turn around in my rearview mirror and flick on the lights. Generally, I would never run, but I was 18 and was one speeding ticket away from losing my license on points. I gunned it, got into town, and just weaved through a bunch of side streets until I was pretty sure I lost him. Here's the kicker, I'm pretty sure I lost him, and now I need to get back onto the main highway quickly. I'm sitting at a red light, waiting for the light to turn, and guess who goes right through the intersection in front of me? It was 1 a.m. or so not many cars on the road. My headlights shined right onto his car as he went in front of me, enough that I could see the guy. 18-year-old me crapped a brick. The cop kept going, and I gunned it to get onto the highway. I wonder if the cop had actually just given up on the chase at that point. From some of the other stories, it seems like they don't always pursue these things that rigorously. Story time. When I was about 14, there was this local store owner who treated the kids like crap, so kids started egging his business. So one night me and my overweight friend decided it's our turn to egg his place. Of course, that was the night he and his friends decided to hide in the store to catch any said eggers, and as soon as I let the first egg fly, they busted out the door after us. I've never seen a fat kid run as fast as my friend. He outran me, and I ran track. I still had a few eggs in my hands, so I started throwing them behind me and I could hear them cursing. I'd like to think that it slowed them down from catching us, but in reality, a bunch of 30-year-old, overweight, beer-drinking stoners weren't going to catch two 14-year-old boys that were scared crapless and running on pure adrenaline. We put the distance between us and them quickly. So here it is, 1 a.m. in a small town, and at this point, we're about 10 blocks from the place we egged. We're on the business side of streets. I want to cross the road so we're in the houses side, where it would be a lot harder for the police to catch us. After hiding in some bushes for a bit and looking to make sure the coast is clear, we make our move. No sooner than we hit the street, we see a cop car like 5 blocks up drive from one street to the next, with a direct line from the police officer's view looking right at us. Suddenly, we heard the screech of his tires as he shot past us, and the sound of the car being revved up in reverse. But by this time, we're hopping back fences and covering blocks and blocks in a matter of minutes. At this point, I'd say we were on the run for about 30 minutes. So we wind up going 10 blocks in basically a C pattern to where we hop fences and cross yards, and we wind up by a house that has a huge weeping willow in front of it, has a direct view of the store we egged, and we can see the police lights, but the tree is so big we can't see past it. But it's the perfect place to hide under, to see what's going on. So we go under it, and we're probably about 7 blocks away, and take a look. I crap you not, there were over a dozen police cars there. This was before the small town I lived in turned to crap, so the police routinely had nothing to do back then. So my friend is like, "Holy crap, look at all these police cars, we're screwed!" Meanwhile, I was saying out loud, "I can't believe there are this many police cars over one frickin' egg." My friend was panicking and I was actually just annoyed that they were making this big a deal out of it. So he says, "Let's just turn ourselves in," and I was like, "No frickin' way." If they were going to make such a big deal, I felt it was the principle that we had to make it back to his house and get away, even if it was just for that night. I said, "All we have to do is go 5 more blocks till we're out of sight of the police, and then cut across to where we're so far away they won't even think we made it that far." He says, "I don't know any of that area. I'm not getting bit by some dog running through backyards." I said, "Mother fricker, we already cut through like 20 backyards, and I'm pretty sure a dog is going to bark before we even get over a fence." I told him he can turn himself in, but I'm making a break for it. He decided to stay with me, so it took us another hour of quietly sneaking through backyards until we were enough distance away that we felt we could cross the main street where all the cops drove to make it back to his place. I considered it a personal victory that we outran half the police force in our town to make it back to his place, even though we turned ourselves in the morning.
We left our bikes at the scene of the crime because we were idiots. I still look back at that time and smile. My one and only cop story. In 8th grade, my friend and I were both crammed in one of those electric razor scooters, heading home, and some lady started yelling at us. My friend slowed us down to hear what she was saying. Apparently, she was giving us a heads up that a cop was a block away. We got off the scooter and walked past the cop and went on our way. In conclusion, avoided confrontation altogether. Was with a friend running, suspecting that cops had been called, and we hid in a bush. I turn to my friend and say, "We need to go, but we have to walk." So we step out of the bush, and not 20 seconds later, a cop car drives straight past us, didn't even slow down. More often than not, if you act innocent, people will think that you're innocent. I train a lot. I run 5 to 6 days a week, 1 long day, usually 1 interval day, and 3 to 4 easy days. So I signed up for the local police fundraiser 5K, beat all the cops to the finish line. I told them they should add more speed work to their training if they want to catch me next year. I feel like this commenter might have taken the title in a little too abstract an interpretation, but I applaud him nonetheless. Now, settle in for a monster story to finish off the video with. Obligatory, not me, but my brother. The following is absolutely true. Gather round, Redditors, as I regale you with the tale of Bad Luck Mike and one of the times he got away from the man. I take you back to the halcyon days of 1990. Y2K was a decade away, and Prince had been hyping some big party he was planning in the works for 8 years at the time. Supposed to be a hell of a bash. Mike had committed a crime in our small suburb of Fort Worth, Texas. Frankly, the crime doesn't matter at this stage in the tale. Point is, he was on the run. Fortunately, our suburb had lots of creeks and storm drains and gullies crisscrossing through it. Every neighborhood was in the vicinity of a small brook of some sort. Also, fortunately, Mike was in the prime of his life. About 23 years old, 6'4", thin as a rail, with a hollow leg to hold all the beer he could steal on a given night, and the biggest swinging member in the town, whether anyone else knew it or not, and the unmitigated gall to go with it. So Mike was running over the hill and dale and crossing under a dim streetlight here and there on the run to one of his friends' place. But lo, a new problem arose. The baying of hounds in the distance. Johnny Law had called in the dogs. Now Mike started jumping fences, scaring little old ladies, and he finally took to where he would have the greatest chance of losing the fuzz. The creeks. Splashing through murky water all throughout our tiny burg, Mike tried to outfox the dogs until he finally came upon an idea and headed for the police station. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why in the frick would you go to the beehive while the bees are already on the hunt for you? But Mike had a plan. See, in Mike's mind, it made perfect sense to walk right by the cop shop. It's the last place anyone would ever think to look for him, and it had worked before. Mike once evaded arrest for a full week while the Fort Worth cops, in a bit of jurisdictional cooperation, tossed our town to bits searching for him. How? Why, he sat in the FWPD lobby and caught up on his reading, for free, from the library, while they searched for him high and low. I told you, unmitigated gall. So Mike finally came upon the police station and he sat back in a copse of trees, making sure the coast was clear. He was covered in mud and muck, all manner of nastiness, and by the sounds of things, the dogs were getting closer. Heart in his throat, there was always the chance he would get seen by someone who was in the right place at the wrong time. Mike walked right by the PD and across the street, to the little laundromat where we washed our clothes every week. At the time, in our town, pretty much all activities stopped around 8 p.m. on the main drag. It was common to leave your front door unlocked and the keys in your car. There wasn't that much crime. So, of course, there were no cameras to see Mike kick open the door of the laundromat, close it again behind him, and strip down to his aforementioned swinging eggplant. Using the change in his pockets, he washed and dried his clothes, and he gave himself a decent scrub in the laundromat restroom sink. An hour later, Mike was walking down the street minding his own business. Presently, the flashing lights behind him caused him to look back quizzically and give the universal hand gesture that says, "What did I do?" An incredibly corpulent cop jumped out of the vehicle looking like he'd had a few too many liters of cola, and with his light in Mike's face said, "I caught you." Another universally understood gesture from Mike, palms up, facing away from him, worry and innocence etched up on his face. "Whoa, Ed, what's up? I'm just going over to so-and-so's house. I'm not doing anything." Of course, Mike knew the cop. Mike knew all the cops. All of us did. We'd had them all in our house at some point in their careers, and it was well known that Mike made a cop's career Interesting. Starting from the age of 15 when he'd become a priest for a few hours in order to pull a truck heist. A tale for another day, gentle Redditors. Ed knew he'd been chasing Mike for the past hour. Mike knew it too, but Mike wasn't about to let Ed get a collar on him. I've been after your butt for an hour, Mike. I've been chasing you through mud and crap, and goddammit, I got you. Wait, Ed, Mike reasoned. You've been chasing me for an hour through mud and crap? Ed, I don't have a spot on me. I'm perfectly clean, man. No, I know it was you, Mike. This goes back and forth for some minutes until Ed's on-duty supervisor pulled up, lights also flashing. He stepped out, looking like an acting double for Dan Aykroyd. Okay, Mike, why are you giving us a hard time? Ed caught you. Let's go. Look, Rick, Mike began. Ed says he's been chasing me through the mud and crap. I'm literally clean. Rick, I feel for you guys, but whoever it was y'all were chasing, it wasn't me. Having been presented with evidence that Mike was indeed clean and couldn't possibly have been running in creeks and streams for the past hour, Rick and Ed let Mike go. Everyone there knew Mike was guilty. As Mike walked off into the proverbial sunset, Ed and Rick knew they would get him eventually. When they finally did a couple of years later, Mike paid dearly for making them look like fools. Never worry, Mike is alive and well and continuing his anti-hero ways today. Gynecologists and OBs. What is the most mind-blowing thing a husband or boyfriend has said? Story from my internship. Checked a woman who was not progressing in labor and thought, that's not a head. Sure enough, the baby was breech. She was a very tiny woman and this was a large baby, so it was pretty clear that she would need a C-section. She was a recent immigrant from a small third-world country, didn't have a partner with her, and spoke absolutely no English. Unfortunately, nobody in the unit spoke her language. I tried my best to mime and explain what was happening and what we were recommending. She nodded yes, but I had a strong sense she didn't understand the explanation. We sent somebody down to housekeeping and the cafeteria, hoping we could find any hospital staff who could translate. Fortunately, we found someone able to translate. It turns out that she understood the baby was breech, but that she thought we would have to literally cut her open and kill her in order to save the baby. Her relief and joy when she finally understood what the plan was something I won't forget. The staff member from housekeeping was wonderful and stayed to support her until she went into the OR. My mum was a general practitioner. She once had a 15-year-old girl come in who had a pregnancy test show positive, but was adamant that she couldn't be pregnant. My mum confirmed the pregnancy, but the girl still refused to believe it was true. She went on to explain to my mum it was impossible for her to get pregnant because her boyfriend had told her that if she laid completely still during the deed, then she wasn't technically doing it and couldn't get pregnant. I was kind of refraining from commenting on any of these stories until I read this crap. This is the kind of loophole you use with the church, not with your doctor, and I can't stop laughing. I worked in a pharmacy and we noticed that a 16-year-old girl was coming back in to pick up her birth control exactly 2 weeks early every month. This was immediately flagged as strange because BC comes in a convenient package that makes it easy to keep track of the daily dose and birth control. It's not really a drug that people hustle to try to get as many pills as they can. Like Xanax, say. After a few months of this, the pharmacist confronted her and learned that every day she took her pill and her boyfriend did too. After Googling what happens when men take birth control, I'm morbidly curious as to how many months this happened for, because the boyfriend in question was probably undergoing some interesting changes as a result. When my wife was delivering our third child, a VBAC, I asked the doctor as a joke, "Can I be the one who chews the umbilical cord in half?" And he looked at me with a distant look and said, "Yeah, I guess." After several complications and several hours, a beautiful girl was in the world and the doctor said, "Okay, Daddy, get down on the floor and chew this cord in two if you're ready." Yeah, I didn't do it. I'm a nurse and helped deliver this girl's first baby. I was still in school at the time. She was like 19, I think. The father, who was obviously much older, was also in the room. After the baby was born, everyone was all excited and emotional, except for the father, who was just like, and shrugged it off. I worked in a diagnostic center. The gynecologist refers a patient for a hoo-ha ultrasound to find out why she's having fertility issues. The techie inserts the probe, woman flinches in pain, the tech asks if it hurts during adult fun times. The woman explains her husband doesn't insert it into the hoo-ha. No, here, while pointing to her belly button. The tech came out red-faced. She had to call the doctor and explain why the patient was having trouble getting pregnant. This happened twice at this clinic. Twice. ER nurse here. Had a 19-year-old woman come in for abdominal pain. She had 2 kids and was pregnant again. She said she was not happy to be pregnant again, but she didn't want to break up with her boyfriend. I thought the boyfriend may have been abusive or not letting her use birth control or something, so I closed the door and asked her some questions. Turns out she didn't know that banging caused babies. Her life skills class consisted of get boyfriend/married and the babies arrive, with no other details, so she thought once you had a boyfriend, babies were automatic and doing the deed was just a fun thing to do. We had a long talk. I'm not an OB, but work at an L&D hospital. In a note for our patient, there was one from a previous office visit that said, "Chief complaint, husband concerned about wife's weight gain during pregnancy." She was actually under the weight she needed to be at during that time. Seeing mum back in the office for her 2-week follow-up after delivery to remove stitches. She had a tear that needed repair, only to find out that the stitches were gone. Turns out hubby took them out because they were bothering him when they were getting intimate. My mother is an OB-GYN. She did a manual hoo-ha exam for a woman, and the husband asked her with an angry tone of voice if there was any other way of doing the exam besides her using her fingers, because he didn't like her putting fingers in his wife. Not an OB, but when I was in med school, I was seeing a pregnant teen who was convinced she couldn't be pregnant. I asked if she was getting intimate with anyone, and she said yes. I asked if she used any kind of contraception, and she said no. However, she said that her boyfriend told her he couldn't get pregnant because he got kicked in the balls. A lot. Not an OB, but I work in an ER, and we had a 22-year-old woman come in a while back. I asked her what she was there for, and she said, "I found a hole." Like an abscess? "I found a hole." Okay, is it a wound? Does it hurt? "No, it's just a hole. It's a black hole." I 100% didn't understand what she was talking about and knew that I wouldn't get any more info from her at the check-in desk, so I gave her the bracelet and sent her to the triage nurse who had the same conversation with her. She didn't specify anything beyond, "Look, it's just a hole." It was her hoo-ha. I can't… What? 22? How? How did this person get this far? There are so many things that should have happened in her life to enlighten her as to the nature of her anatomy. My goodness. Growing up, my mother was very strict and religious, and girls were forbidden from looking or talking about down there. Could be a similar situation? I was working with a girl who hadn't been married very long, and who hadn't had a period since the one right before her wedding. She had told her older sister, and she had told her she needed to find out if she was pregnant. So she went to the doc, and it was confirmed that she was. She pulls me in the back room so no one else can hear, and she tells me, and I tell her congratulations. She says she has a question for me. She's peeing just fine now, but how will she pee when the baby gets bigger? Won't it block the urine? We worked in a library. I went right out to the stacks and got her a book on anatomy and another on pregnancy. I found the pages on the genitourinary system, and we sat in the break room while I read the one for females with her and explained it like it was a storybook. I was so furious that no one had told her a damned thing. On my OB rotation, husband said, "Holy crap," as the baby crowned, vagaled, passed out and hit his head on the bedside table on his way down, and had to be admitted to the same hospital his wife was having the baby at. She ended up getting discharged before he did. I definitely gave a story to the nurse who was taking care of my wife and I after our second kid. Having been going through labor all day, only being on liquids, and not giving birth till almost 9 at night. We were relaxing, relative term, with the nurse holding the baby when I turned to ask the nurse a question. She pauses, turns away, turns back to me and responds with, "Not anytime soon." Disappointed, I tried to ask for more specifics, because I'd casually asked, "When can my wife have snacks?" And that was a pretty nondescript answer for someone who hadn't eaten in 12 hours. Turns out she thought I was asking when my wife and I can have adult fun times together again. After a good laugh, the correct answer was a couple of hours. I can't imagine what was going through her head before the clarification. Work in IM, but a patient's partner not wanting us to reveal an HIV diagnosis to a patient was definitely a low point for me, though where I work it's probably a stretch to even call that surprising. Back in my ER days, a young teenage patient came in with pregnancy-type symptoms. Of course, pregnancy test was positive, and appeared utterly shocked she was pregnant. I asked her if she was intimate with a partner. Yes. Do you use protection? No. Because? No. She still seemed surprised this had happened to her. Mom is an OB-GYN. She called a patient over to tell us she was HIV positive. The patient said, I knew it, to which my mum asked how and why. Turns out the husband had been HIV positive for years, and they'd decided never to speak about it and have unprotected fun times for 5 years. This is what it costs to shirk responsibility and look the other way. In other words, idiot tax. Last month, a dad asked one of our OBs for an extra stitch during his wife's repair after delivery. Her immediate response was, "Exactly how small do you need it to be, sir?" Fricking legend on our unit now. Spread this so it can become the standard response to this all-too-common statement. I'm not an OB or GIN, however I am a flight medic who has delivered 3 babies. I'll never forget any of them. The second baby I delivered was about 5 weeks early, roadside, in East Jesus nowhere. The family had gone camping in the desert and Mum went into labor. By the time we arrived, there was no turning back and baby's head was visible. Mum was sort of squatting with her forearms on the middle row of seats in a van and her booty was aimed out the door. She was clothed in a loose dress. Just as she was pushing the head out, Dad said, Wait, we might get blood on the floor." Mum rounded on him with the biggest death glare and said, "Frick your mum's van." That became a unit motto. Yeah, frick your mum's van, silly dude. Your wife is delivering your baby. If your mum asks you to reupholster her vehicle hot on the heels of this, she's officially a few Fruit Loops short of a bowl. Sister is a nurse in the mum/baby unit who will also work in labor and delivery. One dad asked for a C-section so her hoo-ha wouldn't be ruined. Another dad asking for her to be stitched up extra tight after the delivery. Another dad that couldn't seem to keep his clothes on during their entire stay. The nurses had to have multiple conversations with him to keep his clothes on. He just kept stripping and walking around, like he'd go out to the coffee station in the hall with only his tidy-whities on, and he'd be buck nude in the hospital room. We had to ask him to wear pants and a shirt when in the hall, and at minimum pants in the hospital room. No, he wasn't even trying to do the deed with her. Not a physician, but I do work in obstetrics. We had a code OB called on the overhead, which means a delivery is happening elsewhere in the hospital, and the team needs to get there stat. A woman's husband was worried about getting a parking ticket, so figured he would park in one of the massive parking garages and then walk up to the door as she's literally giving birth. They obviously didn't make it, and she delivered in the car. They were extremely religious, and to prevent her body from being exposed to what could potentially be a male doctor, they kept her pants on the whole time. Baby, placenta, and all were just chilling in this woman's pants. It was horrifying. Baby and mum were okay in the end. Dad is a 30-plus year OB and gynecologist, now retired. He tells a story of a hyper-religious couple, Muslim, who came in about difficulty getting pregnant. He examined the woman alone and discovered that she was actually an intersex person. Male gonads, undistended, no uterus, normal hoo-ha. The woman was mortified to learn this at 18. She feared her husband would be violent, believing he had been being gay by doing the deed with her. My dad gave her the option to call the police or ask for help. He and the nurses gave her phone numbers for counseling and offered discretion when talking to the spouse. She declined everything and asked that they tell the husband together. The man was super upset and they eventually left the office, both in tears. Dad never saw her again and wonders what happened. Multiple people are asking the question, how did she not recognize something was wrong when she missed her period for multiple years? I'd asked this question myself to my dad as well. The answer, if I recall correctly, was that she did experience mild and intermittent menstruation-like symptoms, cramps, bleeding, etc., but they were very far apart and in hindsight completely unrelated to actual menstruation. She was from a rural community and never sought medical attention due to, who knows, money, fear, and the fact that she was otherwise completely healthy, I presume. I remember him saying that the marriage was arranged, and I'm sure her side of the fam were probably apprehensive about fertility issues. These are tricky situations. My grandpa was a surgeon, private practice, and in the army. Toward the end of his life, we discussed some of the crazy things he did and saw. He told me he operated on a man with 2 tumors in his abdomen. Turned out to be fully developed ovaries. He had fully functioning gonads, no hoo-ha or tubes, etc. Grandpa told him the tumors were successfully removed. The human body is a crazy thing. Back in my OB rotation in med school, we had a pregnant woman who was super morbidly obese with a BMI in the 70s. During her prenatal visit, the resident was asking about her pregnancy history, past difficulty with fertility and conception, problems with the pregnancy so far, etc. Pretty standard stuff as I understand at the time. Husband then chimed in about the conception. Turns out they had no trouble conceiving. He then went into detail about how the conception went and blew my little inexperienced mind. Basically, the wife's mother and sister had to help with the conception by holding the wife's thighs out of the way enough so that he could get in to do the job. I still don't have words. Not anything a husband or boyfriend said, but still an interesting story. I once took care of a patient who had a baby as a virgin. She was a very religious woman who was saving her virginity for marriage. She told me she never met the right man and she was ready to have the baby as she was getting older. She was in her early 40s, so she had the IVF done and had a baby while also being a virgin. Not an OB-GYN, but a med student. In one of my rotations, I had an encounter with a father who wanted us to make his wife only reproduce male children by some drugs or procedure. Our head used to tell us that I can tell if it's a boy or girl by only seeing the expressions of the fathers and relatives in the clinical rounds. You're allowed to guess, my country. I missed 2 minutes ago when I didn't know any of this. Me too, anonymous Reddit user, me too. Although I'm glad to say that none of these medical facts have been a revelation to me, there have been some stories that have been uncomfortable for yours truly to read out loud. My dad is a doctor and his friend was an OB-GYN and was telling my dad a time when a couple came into his office and they were having difficulty having a child. They were trying for over a year to have a child, but the wife never got pregnant. Found out that the man and the woman came up in a very strict upbringing and the man was never putting his eggplant inside of her. He was basically rubbing his eggplant on top of her hoo-ha and would splooge across her belly. Then he would take his finger and smear his semen all over the top of her hoo-ha. My dad's friend had to explain how to do the deed to both of them and tell them what to do and how to do it. It was an awkward conversation. I just kept thinking, did they not ever watch adult flicks or have that talk with their parents? Have they never even seen stuff related to doing the deed ever? It was just a crazy story, and I wonder if they ever figured it out and actually eventually had kids or not. My friend told me that her OB-GYN friend told her that apparently a significant number of people try to get pregnant by doing it in the butt. Proper education on these things matters, people. Years ago, I knew a woman that wanted to get pregnant, but that wasn't happening. She told me that one problem was her husband insisting on turning her around at the end and finishing in her butt. Now, she knew that wasn't good for conception, but he didn't, and she couldn't explain it to him in a way that worked. Perhaps I'm just being naive, but things like this make me wonder if he really knew or was playing dumb with his wife so he didn't have to have kids. My doctor told me a story about a baby he delivered. It was the couple's 6th, and they were very observant Orthodox Jews, so when she called at 11 p.m. on Shabbat that labor had started, the husband couldn't drive them to the hospital himself. Although the doctor understood, he tried to help them understand how emergent the situation was because the delivery was going to be so fast. The doctor races to the hospital and waits. He waits 30 minutes. An hour. He's pacing the drop-off. Finally, 90 minutes later, a taxi screeches into the parking lot at 2 a.m. The doctor opens her door to see a baby crowning and the woman yelling and the driver yelling. The husband throws open his door and just sprints off into the parking lot yelling, does a full loop while the baby is born, and runs up as the nurses are wrapping the baby and getting mum and baby into a wheelchair. The doctor said, "What happened? Where did you go?" The dad, I just didn't know what to do." The poor guy was so hopped up on adrenaline that he just took off. Not a mind-blowing thing that was said, but still kind of funny. When I was in medical school, I did my OB rotation on high-risk areas. Medical students were generally scared of these areas, so I was the only student with an awesome attending physician and got to do a lot. We called the attending on this service a random thought generator. If he thought something, he would say or act on it. We had one student that showed up on our service in active labor. She had had a very uneventful pregnancy and couldn't figure out why she was on our service, but hey, we'll take a normal patient. She arrived with perfect makeup, perfect hair, and she had the perfect epidural and was in no pain or distress. The attending looked at me and said that I'd be doing this delivery. Okay, I thought, no problem. Then he looked at the father and said, "No, you'll deliver this one." The father got wide-eyed and the mother started laughing. "He's an air traffic controller. I've never seen him panic before." The nurse took him to the sink, gave him a scrub brush, and had him start washing his hands. We turned back to the mum. "Okay, push. 1, 2, 3, 10. Relax." We looked at the dad and he's still washing that same finger he started with. Okay, that's good enough. A delivery is by no means sterile. Put this and this and this on. Our attending didn't put women in stirrups, but would instead deliver straight onto the bed. He sat the dad on the bed with him on one side and me on the other, and the dad delivered his own healthy child. My mum taught labor and delivery. If the baby won't fit, it's too late for a C-section, so you break up the baby's shoulder so it can fit through. One of her students asked why they don't break the mum's hip instead. Not a doctor, but pregnant. I told my boyfriend we should make and freeze 1 to 2 months of meals before the birth, because we'd be too tired to cook. He looked at me knowingly and said, "Ah yes, like pureed fruits and vegetables, so we don't have to mash them ourselves." He literally thought you feed the baby food from day one. We're in our 30s, college educated, he has a huge, close extended family with lots of babies, and he knows I'm going to breastfeed. I guess he thought you do them both from day one? My ex-boyfriend is an OB-GYN. He got annoyed with me when I was having cramps and said because he was an OB-GYN, he knew exactly what pain felt like and told me to get over it. Should have seen that as the first of many red flags. Obligatory, not an OB-GYN, but an operating room nurse. One gynecologist told us once about their gynecologist in training. We all knew him. He was a young, friendly, and good guy to work with. He was already married, father of 2 kids at the age of 25. This guy only had one negative aspect, and it was affecting his work dearly. He was extremely religious. This doesn't have to be negative, but his decision-making was based on his religion, and he often refused to offer contraceptives to his female patients, and he was reserved talking and explaining contraception methods to couples. It was against his religion. Eventually word got around with his superiors and they had to sit him down, explaining with him it's against the law to withhold any form of help and information. I was a receptionist and this woman came in crying. Her husband was behind her and she said, "Help, I'm bleeding." Long story short, we found out she was actively miscarrying in the lobby. She went to the back room for emergent care while a surgical room was prepped and she was, of course, crying and moaning and seemed to be in immense pain. The husband was stoic the whole time, nonplussed, not bothered in the least. He frowned at her moaning and said, "Will you knock it off? You're embarrassing me." He even had the nerve to ask us to watch his daughter in our break room while he went for a smoke. Had to have an emergency C-section and my husband was in there watching the whole thing over the sheet. After the baby was born, the doctor removed the placenta and my husband asked, "What is that?" Without missing a beat, the doctor turns to the second doctor assisting, holds it up and says, "I don't know. What is this?" All I could see at this point was my husband's face, and it was so worth it. What are your funniest not safe for work jokes? Well, folks, in case it's not obvious, there has had to be a fair bit of swapping out some words for more YouTube-safe alternatives. I think the jokes still work out just fine, though. A mother, father, and 6-year-old son go to a zoo, where they stop to see the elephant. While the father's in the bathroom, the son notices one elephant has a rather large member. Curious, he gets his mum's attention. "Mommy, what's that hanging from the elephant?" "Oh, that's the trunk, honey." "No, further back." "Oh, you mean its tail?" "No, between its legs. That. What is that?" The mother goes red. "Oh, that's nothing, honey." The father returns and the mother goes off to use the bathroom. Still curious, the son asks his dad, "Daddy, what's that hanging from the elephant?" "His trunk, son." "No, further back." "You mean his tail?" "No, that thing, between his legs." "Oh, that. Well, that's the elephant's wang." "Oh, why did Mummy say it was nothing?" "Son, I have spoiled that woman." This one always gets a laugh on construction sites. Little Tommy was about 5 years old. One day he was being a bit of a handful and annoying his mother. His mother said to him, "Timmy, why don't you go across the street and watch the builders work for a while?" Timmy returned home a few hours later and his mother asked him, "Timmy, what did you learn from watching the builders work?" Timmy replied, "Well, first you put the goddamned door up, then the mother fricker doesn't fit, so you have to take that son of a witch back down. Then you have to shave 2 C-word hairs off each side, and then you have to put that wang-sucking door back up." Timmy's mother was gobstruck, and all she could say was, "Just wait until your father gets home." A couple of hours later, Timmy's father gets home. Timmy's mother tells Timmy to tell his father what he'd learned. Timmy repeats what he's learned. "Well, first you put the goddamn door up, then the mother fricker doesn't fit, so you have to take that son of a witch back down. Then you have to shave 2 C-word hairs off each side, and then you have to put that clock-sucking door back up." Timmy's father looked at Timmy with a look of anger and disappointment and said, "Timmy, go outside right now and fetch me a switch." Timmy replied, "Frick you, that's the electrician's job." 3 men got stranded on a desert island. After walking around for a while, they're found by some tribesmen. The natives take them back to their hut. The chief tells them, Go out into the jungle and collect 10 pieces of fruit. The first guy returns with 10 apples and the chief says, now, shove them all up your butt without showing any emotion or we'll kill you. He shoves the first up and is in terrible pain, but shows no emotion, but during the process of pushing up the second, he flinches and therefore gets killed. The second guy comes back with 10 cherries and gets told to do the same. He's finding it relatively easy, but when he gets to the 8th, he starts laughing hysterically and gets shot. He meets the first guy in the afterlife, and the guy asks, why did you do that? Why did you laugh? And the second guy replies, well, I'd nearly finished when I saw the next guy walking up with 10 pineapples. An Aussie is on holiday driving through New Zealand when he spots a bloke in a paddock doing the deed with a sheep. The Aussie pulls his car over and yells out to the Kiwi fella, mate, in Australia we shear those. The Kiwi turns and yells back, I'm not shearing this one, bro. You can get your own frickin' one. Honestly, you would be surprised at how many jokes in this thread just seem to be the Kiwis and Aussies slandering each other. I might try to spread out those jokes a little bit. A man buys a pack of prophylactics at the pharmacy. The pharmacist says, large pack, huh? The guy buying says, yeah, I'm meeting my girlfriend's parents tonight. After dinner, when we go home, we'll be getting it on. Later at the dinner, the guy is praying before he eats his food. His girlfriend says, I didn't know you were religious. The guy replies, I didn't know your dad was a pharmacist. A ventriloquist is going for a walk through the countryside. It's a hot day and the sun is beating down on him and he's getting tired and needs a break when he spots a farmhouse. The old farmer that lives there is sitting on his porch in a rocking chair, so the ventriloquist walks up and asks if he can have a glass of water and a shady spot to sit for a bit. The farmer misses having company, so him and the ventriloquist begin chatting while the ventriloquist rests. Now, this ventriloquist has a mischievous side and comes up with an idea. He asks the farmer, I see you have this big farm here. Can I see some of the animals? And the farmer gladly brings him around to the barn. First, they see a pig, and the ventriloquist walks up to it and says, hello there, Mr. Pig. How's life on the farm? Then, using his skills as a ventriloquist, he makes it seem as though the pig replies to him by saying, I love it here. I've got plenty of food and plenty of mud to roll around in. The farmer nearly falls over in shock, exclaiming, oh my stars, it can talk. The ventriloquist nods seriously and asks what other animals he has. So the farmer brings him over to an old horse. The ventriloquist asks, hello, Mrs. Horse. How are you on this fine day? To which the horse appears to reply, another beautiful day out here in the countryside. Plenty of room to graze in, clean water to drink, and clean hay to sleep on. Again, the farmer can't believe what he's seeing. All this time and I never knew they could talk, he says. Then the ventriloquist spots some sheep in a pen nearby and says, hey, do you mind if I say hello to the sheep? The farmer's face goes bright red and shouts, don't you talk to those sheep! They're liars! Everyone knows those sheep are damn liars! A guy and a girl meet up in a hospital elevator. The girl says, I'm here to give blood. They give me $10 every time I give blood. What are you here for? The man says, I'm here to donate semen. They give me $50 every time I donate. They go their separate ways until a week later when the man sees the girl rushing for the elevator. He holds the door open for her until she gets in. Here to donate blood again? He asks. She shakes her head. Father comes home and little Johnny comes running in tears. Dad, Sparky died. I came home and he was lying on his back with his feet in the air. Dad tries to find the right words. Eventually explains, Sparky is reaching up so Jesus can reach down and take him to heaven. Johnny mulls this over. It makes sense and he feels better. Weeks later, Johnny comes running out in a state of panic. Dad, Mommy almost died today. Oh my God, what happened? I came home early from school and heard moaning. Mommy was on her back with her feet in the air, screaming, Jesus, I'm coming! And if it wasn't for Uncle Bobby holding her down, we would have lost her for sure. An old man is sitting on his porch and he sees a kid walking by carrying a roll of duct tape. Old guy yells out, Hey kid, where are you going with that duct tape? Gonna catch me some ducks, says the kid. What? You can't catch ducks with duct tape, he yells back, but the kid continues on his way. A couple of hours later, the kid is walking back the other way, carrying 4 ducks wrapped in duct tape. The old man can't believe it. The next day, the old guy is sitting on his porch again, and he sees the kid walking by. This time, he's got a roll of chicken wire under his arm. The old guy yells out, Hey kid, where are you going with that chicken wire? Gonna catch me some chickens, says the kid.
Seriously? You can't catch chickens with chicken wire, he yells back, but once again, the kid just continues on his way. Later that day, the kid walks back the other way and sure enough, he's got half a dozen chickens wrapped up in the chicken wire. The old guy is astounded. Next day, once again, the old guy is sitting out on his porch and he sees the kid walking in front of his house. He yells out, "Hey kid, what you got under your arm there?" "Pussy willow," says the kid. "Hang on, I'll go get my hat." An Australian is in New Zealand working on a sheep farm with a bunch of Kiwis. After a couple of weeks, he goes to one of them and says, "Hey mate, where are all the girls at? I haven't been laid in ages." The Kiwi says, "Nearest girl is 3 hours away. What we do here when we get in the mood is head down to the paddock, pick us at a sheep, and give it a good rooting." The Aussie is naturally disgusted, but as the weeks go by, he grows more and more desperate. Finally, he sneaks down to a secluded paddock, creeps up on a sheep, drops trow, and starts going to town. Almost immediately, he hears all the other farmhands laughing at him. Trying to quickly pull his pants back up, he yells, "I thought all you guys did it." "We do," replied one of the Kiwis, "but you picked the ugly one." Well, I told you there'd be a few of these, didn't I? These two countries really have an axe to grind with each other, it seems. My girlfriend tried to make me do the deed with her on the hood of her Honda Civic. I refused. If I'm going to do it on a Honda, it's going to be on my own accord. What's the difference between a pickpocket and a peeping Tom? A pickpocket snatches watches. Kinda like the difference between a magic show and a burlesque show. What's the difference? Well, a magic show is a cunning array of stunts. How about the difference between an epileptic cornhusker and a working girl with diarrhea? All right, what's the difference? An epileptic cornhusker shucks between fits. Man walks by a shop. There's a sign out front that says, cheese sandwiches $1, pull jobs $5. So he walks in and sees a beautiful blonde standing behind the counter. "Are you the woman who gives pull jobs?" She says, "Why yes I am," in a very flirty tone. He says, "Well, wash them hands and make me a cheese sandwich." This is my go-to joke. Gets a laugh every time. There's a bar right outside the town I live in that's a hot spot for people driving through town. One night, this guy walks in and sees a jar full of $10, $20, $50, and even a couple of $100 bills in there. So he asks the bartender, "How does somebody win that tip jar?" The bartender says, "That's for anyone who can make the horse in the back laugh." So he strolls to the back where the horse is, closes the door, and a couple of minutes later, he walks out and the horse is laughing uncontrollably. He casually takes the tip jar on his way out. A couple of months later, he enters the same bar and sees an even bigger jar full of cash. So he asks the bartender how to win this one. "That's for anyone who can make the horse stop laughing." The man gets up, walks to the back, and sure enough, a couple of minutes later he walks out and the horse is dead silent. The man grabs the tip jar and is walking away and the bartender says, "Hey, wait! I gotta know, how did you do it?" The man says, "Well, the first time I told him my wang was bigger than his, and the second time I showed him." 3 men are at the gates of heaven. St. Peter says, "Heaven is a big place. You'll need a vehicle to get around. You'll get one based on how faithful you were to your partner." The first man says, "In our decades of marriage, never once was I even attracted to another woman. I was only faithful to my wife." St. Peter gives him a Rolls Royce. The second man says, "Well, sometimes I had a few one-night stands, but I still loved my wife, and I never lapsed any time else." St. Peter gives him a moderately expensive car. The third man says, "I'm sorry to say this, but I was incredibly unfaithful. I had affairs every week." He gets a bicycle. The 3 men meet a few minutes later. The first guy is crying. The second man asks, "Why are you crying? You have a Rolls Royce." And the first guy says, "Well, I just saw my wife riding by on a skateboard." A man goes to a brothel. The madam welcomes him and says that there's currently a lot of free women and he can do the deed with all of them. The man is very happy with the suggestion and takes the deal. The next day, after such a steamy night, he decides to go back. The madam welcomes him and says that right now only one girl is available. Well, the man was a little upset, but it's better than nothing. After another happy night, he decided to come back again. The madam welcomes him yet again and says, "Oh, sorry, we have no one available right now." The man is clearly upset and keeps asking, maybe he could wait. The madam says, "Well, there is one unpopular choice. You can do it with a badger." Since the man is really feeling the need, he decides why the hell not and took the deal and did the deed with the badger. As a loyal client, he decided to come back tomorrow. The madam welcomes the man but says, "Oh, sorry, there are no girls available. The customer got upset. But hey, what about the badger?"
The madam says, "Sorry, even he is taken, but the brothel is introducing a new activity. Watch from the two-way mirror how other clients do the deed with the ladies." The man agrees to try it out. In the room there are many spectators and the couple being watched are going really rough and hard. The man pokes another client and says, "Hey, look, what a show." The fellow man smiles and replies, "That's nothing. You should have seen the guy the other night doing it with a badger." Somehow I get the feeling that even if I'm not specifically using the naughty words, that this video might get demonetized anyway? Let's test it out, I guess. A young Greek couple are about to get married, and before the nuptials, the young woman's mother pulls her aside for a quick chat. And Greek men are known to prefer making love in a very specific way. So at some point, he may ask you to turn around. Now, I want you to know that it's okay to say no if you don't want to do it that way. The wedding day comes and goes, and there's no turnaround request from her husband. No request on the honeymoon, nor through their first year. No special request for their first anniversary or their second. Halfway through their third year, her husband says, "You know, if you want, you can turn around and we can try this a different way." The woman says, No. My mother warned me that this day might come and she told me I'd never have to do that if I don't want to." The husband replies, "Well, that's fine with me, but I thought you wanted kids one day." A man is leaving town for a business trip. Knowing he'll be gone for a few weeks, he decides to treat his wife to a new adult toy to keep her satisfied until he returns. However, looking around the local shop, he doesn't see anything that he thinks she'll like. At that point, the shop owner approaches and says, "If you're having trouble deciding, may I show you one of our special items?" "Sure," says the man thankfully. The owner takes out a box from behind the desk labeled Voodoo Wang and explains that it'll fit any hole and do anything you need it to using voodoo magic. The man is skeptical, so he asks for a demonstration. Happy to oblige, the owner says, "Voodoo Wang, my hand." At once, the previously inanimate object springs to life and starts moving back and forth in the owner's hand as if he were giving it a pull job. "Voodoo Wang, the door," he continues and points to the entrance. The magic toy flies to the door, shrinks to the size of the door's keyhole, and starts going to town. "Now," cautions the owner, "this is the important part. Once it starts, it won't stop until it hears, 'Voodoo Wang, your box.'" On cue, the Voodoo Wang leaves the door, changes back to its normal size, and returns, dormant, to the box. The man is thrilled with his find and buys it for his wife. When it comes time for him to leave, he gives her the new toy and demonstrates how it works like the shop owner did. The wife, very excited about the new toy, thanks her husband and wishes him well on the trip. About a week passes and the wife decides to try out the Voodoo Wang. Removing it from the box, she says, "Voodoo Wang, my hoo-ha." Well, the Wang doesn't hesitate. Jumping out of the box, it changes size to perfectly fit the woman's body and goes to town. It's fantastic. It does everything she wants it to and knows exactly when to speed up, slow down, get rough, be gentle, you name it. After her second climax, the woman says, "Voodoo Wang, stop!" But nothing happens. Again, she says, "Voodoo Wang, stop!" But still nothing happens. Realizing she forgot the magic phrase, she starts to panic. Grabbing some clothes and her car keys, she makes a mad dash to the hospital to see if they can help her. She's about halfway there when she has a third, massive, full-bodied climax and starts losing control of the car. At this point, a cop sees her driving erratically and pulls her over. "Ma'am, you're driving very recklessly. Care to explain yourself?" Well, she does her best to explain the Voodoo Wang to the police officer, but he's clearly not buying it. "It's the truth," she pleads shakily. "Yeah, right," scoffs the cop. "Voodoo Wang, my butt." Bill worked in a pickle factory. He had been employed there for a number of years when he came home one day to confess to his wife that he had a terrible compulsion. He had an urge to stick his pickle into the pickle slicer. His wife suggested that he should see some kind of therapist to talk about it, but Bill indicated he'd be too embarrassed. He vowed to overcome the compulsion on his own. One day, a few weeks later, Bill came home absolutely ashen. His wife could see at once that something was seriously wrong. "What's wrong, Bill?" she asked. "Do you remember that I told you I had this tremendous urge to put my wang into the pickle slicer?" "Oh, Bill, you didn't." "Yes, I did." "My God, Bill, what happened?" "I got fired." "No, Bill, I mean, what happened with the pickle slicer?" "Oh, she got fired too." A man is standing stark bare naked on a street corner. A cop walks up and tells him, "Sir, you can't be doing that here unless you have a good excuse. I'm going to take you to jail." "Yes, sir, I have a good excuse. I was at my girlfriend's apartment, we started drinking. Next thing you know, she jumps up and says, 'Let's take our clothes off and go to town.' I guess I beat her here. Two guys ring the bell of a brothel. The madam opens the door. What do you want? What can we get for $5? For $5, you can crank each other off in those bushes over there. She shuts the door. A few minutes later, the bell rings again. The madam opens the door, and it's the same two guys. So, who do we pay? And now, ladies and gentlemen, some nun jokes for your enjoyment. Sister Claire and Sister Teresa are driving down a desert highway when the devil appears on their hood, making threatening gestures. Quick, Sister Teresa says, show him your cross. Sister Claire leans out the window, shouting, Piss off, you wanghead! I'll kick you in the frickin' gonads if you try that crap again! Don't mess with me, you prick! Two young nuns are asked by their Mother Superior to paint a room in their convent, and are sternly warned not to get paint on their habits. To ensure they comply with Mother Superior's order, they decide to remove their clothing and paint in the buck, as the only eyes that will see them will be each other's and those of God. After painting for over an hour, there's a knock at the door. Panicking, the first nun asks, Who's at the door? A reply comes in, It's the blind man. May I come in? The nuns look at each other. Neither wishes to turn away the blind man. The second nun says, If the man is blind, he won't see our exposed bodies. We should let him in. The first nun agrees and opens the door to the man. Nice hooters. Now, where do you want these blinds? A young man walks up and sits down at the bar. What can I get you? The bartender inquires. I want 6 shots of Jägermeister, responded the young man. 6 shots? Are you celebrating something? Yeah, my first go at oral. Well, in that case, let me give you a 7th on the house. No offense, sir, but if 6 shots won't get rid of the taste, nothing will. A cop is eating lunch at a diner when he overhears an elderly couple, maybe in their 80s, talking. The man says, Do you remember this place? The woman answers, Of course. Behind this diner is where we first did the deed. The man says, What do you say we do it again? The woman giggles and says, Why not? And they both get up to leave. The cop was taken aback by this and was curious, so he decided to follow them. He follows them as they slowly walk behind the diner. When they go behind the diner, he decides he will just stay there to make sure no one bothers them. He then watches as the lady slowly lifts her dress and the man grabs his pants. The man grabs the fence in front of him and starts going at it full force, like a stallion with his first mare. The cops were taken aback. This guy seemed to have more stamina than anyone in the world. When they were done, the couple starts walking out of the alley and the cop decides to talk to the man. He had to know how he was able to do that. The cop said, How are you able to keep going like that, even at your age? The man smiled and answered, Well, for starters, 60 years ago, that fence wasn't electric. A man moves into a new town and wants to make friends. He goes to the local bar and orders a drink. The bartender says, Hey, you're new. You want to try out our bar challenge for new guys? The man says, Let me hear it. The bartender then goes and says, Well, first you need to drink this whole bottle of Patron without stopping. Then you have to juggle these 10 beer bottles. After that, there's a gator outside with a loose tooth. Then there's my poor old sister upstairs that's never had a climax in her life. The man says, F that, I'm not doing that. But after a few beers, he says, Give me that Patron, with fire in his eyes. He chugs the Patron, no problem. He juggles the beer bottles with no problem. Then he goes outside to the gator. The occupants then hear the gator roar and scratch the man. They hear groans and moans from the man. Then they hear silence. The man comes back to the bar, still adjusting his pants, and says, Okay, now where's that woman with the loose tooth? What inappropriate things do female coworkers do to male colleagues? I have one nip that's always erect. It's a side effect from when it was pierced. Had a female coworker who loved to walk by and flick it or outright pinch it. Didn't matter if I was talking to people or just passing her in the hallway. She thought it was playful and would do it all the time. I found it emasculating and embarrassing and asked her to stop repeatedly. It was annoying as F. I wanted to handle it quietly, but she wouldn't stop. Apparently, I was just too sensitive. Actually, it's my nip that's sensitive. It's okay because you're gay. Gay guys like it. Solution. She did it to me as we were entering a room for a staff meeting. I said in a slightly above normal voice in front of our entire team, I need you to stop touching my nips. Never touch me again. You could hear a pin drop. Got an email from my boss later that day. Your issue has been addressed. It will not happen again. How did a comment about my nips become the most viewed thing I've ever done on the internet? This one I see in the military a lot. Don't demand equality and treatment like men just to turn around and pull the "but I'm a female, I shouldn't have to do this" excuse. At a company meeting in front of a lot of our co-workers, a woman snuck up behind me and began to give me a neck rub without asking me for permission. I was not pleased, but I didn't say anything because I didn't want to make a scene. When female colleagues massage my neck/shoulder region with one hand while I'm at my desk. Reverse the roles and I would have been seen as the creep. Oh dear. Yeah, massage creeps crop up in all sorts of situations, and I might have briefly flirted with being one for a while, but mostly in my circle of friends, and I will discourage all of that non-consensual touchy-feely crap in others to my dying day. I had a coworker who couldn't wait to tell you about her medical issues. No matter how personal, no matter how much I asked her not to, I got a blow-by-blow of her pap, rectal exam, colonoscopy, and bathroom problems. I wasn't interested in her gynecological issues nor her gastrointestinal issues. Leave me out of it. I have a coworker who's in her 40s and is married with children. Every time I walked past her or I'm near her, she always calls me some pet name like baby or hot stuff. Sometimes it's a little more mundane, like handsome, but either way, she says it out loud where not only staff but students could also hear, and that's super awkward for me. When I used to be a cashier supervisor in retail, about 18 to 19 years old at the time, there was one girl cashier who asked me to come help her. She poked my stomach in front of a customer at the register where she was ringing up his products. I kinda just brushed it off and was very direct with this old man in his 50s who just watched this girl poke me. "Have a nice day, sir." He looked at me with a smile on his face, trying to hold back laughter. I was pretty embarrassed, but I didn't show it. On another occasion, she turned around and pointed her butt at me while looking at me and pointing at it. I think it probably has to be the weirdest way a girl has ever shown interest in me. Bonus story, while working at this retail job, I would greet guests coming through the front entrance. One time, 2 older ladies walked in and I said, "Hey guys, how are you today?" They kind of looked at me funny. About 30 minutes later, my store manager walks over and pulls me aside asking if I called 2 old ladies guys. I thought he was joking and smiled/chuckled. He was completely serious. They filed a complaint against me. Word to the wise, avoid calling older women guys. Don't touch my beard unless I invite you to do it. I don't care how big or fluffy it looks, leave it be. Bringing your hand that close to someone's face is kind of an intimate gesture. Just don't do it. I've had some women laugh at me because I don't drink, or drink as heavy as the other dudes, and I get told to grow a pair. I'm sorry, does being a male require me to drink my butt off all the time? A, I'm not drinking because I don't want so many calories because I sit my butt down at my desk all day. B, I'm Asian, and I can't physically take nearly as much alcohol as most burly guys. And C, I'm picky with my alcohol. If it tastes like pee to me, I don't like it. Stop asking me when me and my girlfriend are getting married. I'm already living that. Steve, you're 30. Why don't you have kids? Coworker, I've told you. Mrs. Steve has endometriosis and is being treated for it, and it's not an option currently. Leave me the frick alone about it. But Steve, don't you want to have kids? Your kids would be so cute. Rinse, repeat. I have a female coworker that likes to sit on the arm of my chair while we're supposed to do something work-related together. I mean, just pull up a chair and sit next to me. It's not like there aren't any chairs around. Yeah, just because I'm the only guy, that doesn't mean I automatically have to do all the lifting or damn furniture moving. I wasn't hired as a mule, and they would lose their minds if I told them, I don't clean, that's a woman's job. Don't call me hun or darling or any of those. I have a name. I'm not calling anyone babe or dame. And don't fricking touch me. I don't want a hug. I don't want to be playfully slapped. I don't want to be grabbed. We're not friends. I'll shake your hand. I'm not your pet project to feed your ego that you feel you know what looks good and what doesn't. Don't like my hair or clothes? Too fricking bad. If it's in the dress code, you shouldn't care. If I want to change my look, then I will change it. Not because you think this would look good on me, or that it would make me look more presentable. If I commented on your too short skirt or tight butt, skin-colored leggings, I'm sure I'd be pulled in front of HR. A few years ago, the HR manager, a woman around the same age as me, found out that it was my birthday. She got excited, grabbed my hand and led me, holding my hand the whole way, to the general manager's office to tell him that it was my birthday. I was super uncomfortable the whole time, both for her making a big deal of my 37th birthday as if I were turning 7 instead, and because she was holding my hand. I didn't know what to do, and she finally realized that she shouldn't be holding an employee's hand in front of the general manager, and she thankfully let go. I know it made the writer of the story very uncomfortable, but the image of a grown man, and not even a young one at that, being led off like a school kid is quite funny. Please don't lift my shirt up to look at my chest and back. Yes, I know I'm hairy. If I did that to you, I'd be fricking fired.
I think we can agree that lifting someone's shirt clearly crosses the line.
I'm retired now, but women felt free to use the men's room whenever the women's room was occupied. I'd walk in and be told to get out. Men using the women's room would have caused a stir. Also, they completely ignore the dress code. Women could get away with wearing shorts and flip-flops to the office, but men had to wear slacks and acceptable non-sneaker shoes. I don't care if a woman uses the men's room, but if they told me to get out while doing so, I would absolutely refuse. If you're the one bending the rules, you have to be on your best behavior. Making statements about men in uniform being a fantasy for them. If I walked up to you in a coffee shop and told you I have a fantasy of doing MILFs or blondes or baristas or 21-year-olds, etc., while rubbing your arm, I would be in deep crap. Don't try to expose body parts to avoid a ticket. If I accidentally let my wang show on a traffic stop, I'd catch another charge. Don't invite me into your home if the reason you called me does not require it. It is very uncomfortable telling you 4 times that I do not need a cup of coffee. Yes, I know your kids are at school and your husband is at work. You've told me a half dozen times. But I'm here because someone drove over your mailbox and I'd really like to just finish this call and get back into my car because it's really cold and my lunch started 3 minutes before this call came out. Honestly, it's incredibly uncomfortable turning down advances while at work. I could be in a very isolated setting with a woman, or worse, a teenager, on a mundane call. Women can get nasty even when you turn them down as politely and respectfully as possible. I don't want you telling people I touched you or made an advance or insert unprofessional action here. Everyone hates cops now. Everyone loves a scandal and would believe you before any investigation. I have called supervisors and partners to a scene because I wanted someone there with me just because of a woman's statements or actions. Civil service is a lot like your food server. We're being polite because it's part of the job. Don't take my politeness as flirting. I've had a coworker who would jokingly slap my face. I asked her to stop many times. She would still slap me in the face. Either kinda hard on the face or as hard as she could on the arm. Told my boss if she slapped me again, I'd slap her right back, and got in trouble for even saying it. I wanted to add something. I agree completely with everyone saying I shouldn't have said I'd slap her back. However, at the time, I still think it outlined the hypocrisy of the situation. After following a conversation, my manager told me that if it happened again, to come back to him with CCTV footage, which covers 99% of where we work. He's an alright boss. I think he panicked at my remarks initially. Had a female coworker that would pinch people. She thought it was cute flirting. No, it's not cute to leave significant bruises all over my arms and chest. She even drew blood a few times because she dug in her nails so hard. Finally got her to stop by avoiding her at all costs and keeping at least an arm's length away from her. Oh yeah, that's definitely inappropriate behavior in the workplace and battery. Report that and escalate to police report if it's not being handled in-house. Just because you're a guy doesn't mean that it's not wrong. You and your boss should be taking this seriously. Don't put up with her behavior. You deserve a safe work environment. Number 1. My muscles are not free to touch just because they look big today. Number 2. Neither is my hair or beard. Number 3. No, I will not comment on your appearance because I don't care how you look and I won't validate or invalidate whatever nonsense you're feeling today. 4. Every request that begins with "a real man would," well, I guess I'm not a real man. Number 5. Not feeling like any undesirable or inconvenient chore is mine by default because I'm a man. Understand real man statements for what they are. Attempted manipulation. It's an immediate red flag that forces me to closely evaluate the statement and typically ends with me ignoring it on principle. This whole series of stories is just giving me flashbacks to being a barista in a coffee shop with loads of regulars. There were some female customers there who treated a few of the workers like a lot of these women treat their colleagues. Where I live, a lot of older women, older than 20s me, like 40, but not like 80, and more typically mothers, tend to refer to younger men by somewhat odd pet names. For example, honey, love, darling, dear, pet, and good lad. I imagine it's because they're just so used to referring to their children, who may well be close to my age, as such. Often when I'm very much their peer or even on occasion their superior. At worst, it's a touch condescending and consequently rude, and not that inappropriate, and it's commonly understood to be nice and well-meaning. However, outside the context of my own culture, for example when dealing with US peers whose workplaces are more corporate, it comes across as super weird and inappropriate and makes our US colleagues feel uncomfortable and harassed, which makes me uncomfortable. It puts me in the awkward position of having to call them on it. A relatively small complaint to have though, which is nice. Come to Yorkshire, the only time people don't call each other love is between two men. I went to visit an agency on Stoke-on-Trent. Our account manager had told me at a previous work trip abroad that affectionate duck was used over love in that area of the UK. They had a cook on site, and she came into the meeting room to see what we wanted for lunch. As they introduced me, she went, "All right, duck," and I nearly lost it with laughter. Please, just stop commenting about how cute I am and stop pulling my goddamn cheeks every time you're talking to me. I'm a 25-year-old grown man, for frick's sake. I should say that I do let the ladies do it because they're like my grandmas, and most heartbreaking of all is that they don't have a family to call their own. So they consider the three young people, me and my best friends AJ and Akash, as their sons and grandsons. Women would just sit on my desk and try to be flirty and this or that, trying to be suggestive or alluring, and it was just awkward as frick. Also, feeling me. Yeah, I lift, but grabbing my chest or shoulders or biceps and whatnot, imagine the outrage if I was a girl. It's the hypocrisy that tees me off more than anything. I've had it happen in several workplaces. Just because you're a guy, so you're obviously into female attention, and fit, these women believe they can feel you up all over your torso and sometimes go for the butt. Like, why don't we get off the clock and ask each other's permission to start groping each other? Maybe I'm not interested in you. If I walked up to any woman at work and said, "Wow, your hooters are huge today," grab bosom. "Those squats are working, cutie," grab butt. "Hey, can you get me that list for X?" hand on thigh. Those things would lose me my job immediately, but women can comment on physique and feel me up constantly with no repercussions. The few times I've gone to a boss about it, I'm the butthole. Stop coming up to me with office gossip. You're wasting my time. I don't care if Jessica is sleeping with so-and-so or if Carol is a real witch. Stop coming up to me to show me your 3-year-old put his shirt on backwards with a 10-minute backstory. I've never met your family. I don't want to meet your family. You're my co-worker and not my friend. I don't care. When I have a mustache, don't call it a prawn stash. Don't make jokes about me being inappropriate with children. It's facial hair, not a sexual organ. Please, do not touch me. Just don't touch me. I wouldn't touch you. Don't touch me. And now for the actual inappropriate acts, which only seems to come from women who are 40 or older. Don't call my haircut or outfit or anything hot. If I did that, I'd be in trouble. Don't talk to me about your romantic life. I don't want to hear about your man going down on you just as much as you don't want to hear about me railing my latest Tinder match. Don't ask my help with moving some files from a computer to a USB drive if those files are exposed photos of yourself that you've recently taken. Don't rub your chest, moan and lift your shirt, exposing your 55-year-old bosom in a bra while exclaiming, "None of y'all could handle this." Well, at least that last one was fired. Don't slap my butt. Don't grab my waist. Don't touch my chest. I've been harassed in most jobs I've had. I happen to have mostly worked in female-dominated industries. It's more of a mild annoyance or inconvenience for me because I've never felt threatened or in danger, but that doesn't make it right. Yeah, while it's true that these kinds of things happening to men can be very upsetting and even traumatizing, for the most part we don't feel physically threatened by the harassers. It's good to see this as a call for solidarity against people who use inappropriate behavior across both genders. Had a woman at work fired for walking over to one of her subordinates' desks when he had a question and sat on his lap. I'm guessing he made a loud enough stink because security escorted her out that Friday. Yeah, I should think about that. My female coworkers have a weird obsession with my butt. Can't even count how many times it's been slapped by them. Some of them are okay looking while others are downright ugly. I work for a middle-aged Italian man, and the one time I brought it up, he asked me if I was gay. I declined and he told me to suck it up. It doesn't bother me that much, but I know if I'd do the same thing, I would be fired and possibly charged with sexual harassment. I think that double standard bothers me more. A bunch of them constantly talk about people's sexuality. I don't really care, but they keep insisting I'm gay. Not in a negative way, because they always say, not that it's a bad thing. I guess it's just C-wordness more than anything else. Females in Australia have the yearly charity firefighter calendars up. These are shirtless calendars of muscle men.
This is in a public service office in Australia. I'm not offended, but if I put up a bikini calendar, I would immediately be in trouble.
Just make sure it's a charity bikini calendar.
And no, not the kind where the woman is named Charity.
Do not talk to men about how much you hate men. You put them in a lose-lose scenario. If they agree with you, they're self-hating. If they argue with you, you brand them as a chauvinist pig. So please, simply ask them, did you literally just come over here to talk to me about how much you hate people like me? Then they're in the position of having to defend themselves.
Oh, I don't mean all men.
You literally just said, I hate all men.
Yeah, that's just a figure of speech. I just hate the sexist men. I didn't mean you.
Now, I get it, and she didn't mean me, and I agree because sexist men were a constant hassle each and every day, but the word sexist in that phrase matters. It matters because I've had more than one friend go off the deep end on that phrase and forget that not all, insert gender here, is a terrible piece of crap. Collective grouping is lazy and leads to false conclusions.
I hate when reps bat their eyes to try to convince you to go with their product over another. I will make my decision on efficacy and price, thank you very much, not on whether or not you'll give me an ocular pull job.
I had a coworker who was sitting on a flimsy makeshift table and fell through it. He got stuck and the girls surrounded him and tried to take his wang out of his jeans. Pretty sure it made him uncomfortable because he shouted at them. To clarify, they weren't actually trying to take his wang out. They laughed and joked about it and fondled the general area of his zipper and tugged at his belt. One was shouting, "Get his belt! Get his belt!" The guy's name was Patrick and the book he was reading got ruined. Fell into a knocked-over bottle of Mountain Dew Code Red.
Where do you work?
He works from home. Wow, that is messed up. Poor guy. I work in an environment that's heavily female dominant. Until our 2 new hires started yesterday, I was the only man in the office. Don't tell me the details about your life at home. I really can't explain in words how much I don't give an F about what your husband said that made you mad, or your dealings with so-and-so and that said something, and what you said in response. I get that women process stuff differently overall, and I know they aren't looking for solutions, they just want empathy, so I listen and put up with it. But there are 2 women on my team about whom I know far more than any man not married to them has a right to. General cattiness. For instance, this one old lady would complain about how the younger girls would dress like working girls, while she wore deep-cut blouses that showed her wrinkly old chest. I don't care what anyone wears, but I never understood that. I'm a younger female who's often worked in environments like this. I've never worked in environments that had dress codes except for things that would be safety issues, like wearing flip-flops, which was never really enforced, even. On a couple of occasions, at different places, I had co-workers, always middle-aged and female, get offended at something I wore, which was something modest. The older ones often wore things inappropriate, bra straps popping out, sheer clothing, too tight pants, etc. But I'm the one who offends people. Stop asking my opinion about their bodies, like asking if those clothes make their bosoms or butts look big. Stop asking about my feelings when I only ask you to send an email to the supervisor about some pressing issues with accounts. Please don't talk aloud in the rec room while we're at lunch. Your romantic life is not that important for an audience. Stop saying things like, "Imagine a guy like him," pointing at me, but with a bigger beer belly, and trying to guess our wang sizes solely based on our hands or feet. Don't use my shoulders to cry on because I look like your older brother when your last Tinder boyfriend slept with your friend. Oh, and don't show pictures of you wearing some lingerie and ask if your boyfriend will enjoy that treat. All these examples I pointed out happened along the years. I'm only in my mid-30s and along the years moved between jobs several times, and these are just some of the things I've remembered that if the genders were reversed would be made into a call to HR. Did your high school ever have an incident or event? What was it? My high school had some kind of scandal with a music teacher and an underage boy. The school's reputation was so trashed they had to change the name of the school to keep people from making the association. A student at my high school shot himself in the chest at lunchtime in front of his ex-girlfriend because she had broken up with him. He didn't survive. I used to live in the United States Virgin Islands on a smallish island called St. Thomas, and back in my freshman year, school was called off early, within the first few periods of the day, and we weren't allowed to leave the buildings we were in until our parents came to pick us up. No one was really sure what was happening until SWAT teams pulled up to the school and started filing out along the street, and that's when word reached us that a Bengal tiger had escaped within the island, which was a surprise considering our nearest zoo catered to aquatic animals. Once my dad came to pick me up, I was escorted out of the school's gates with 2 SWAT members covering both sides, and as we left, learned that most of the main town had been occupied by SWAT teams, which I wasn't even aware we had on the island up until that point, with roadblocks set up here and there, all ready to stop themselves a tiger. The next day, however, we learned that there was not an escaped tiger on the island, but that there was instead a lost Bengal cat that had been named Tiger by its owner that was misprinted in the newspaper as being an actual tiger that caused a giant frickin' panic across the whole island. In conclusion, part of an island was shut down by a fricking house cat. Since there's been a few people asking if he was ever found, from what I can gather, the tiger has been missing to this day. Holy crap, I think you win the thread. My school was having a spirit week, and one of the days was superheroes and supervillains, like Marvel or DC. Someone came dressed in a full clan member outfit because she wanted to be a villain. Bunch of local news stations reported the story, and everyone in our area knew about it. My school had a spirit week, and one of the days was Heritage Day. Some African American kids thought it would be funny to dress up as slaves. We didn't have a Heritage Day the next year. Well, both of these stories were funny and incredibly effed up at the same time. Well done to everyone involved, and I hope none of them ever did it again. One kid dressed up as the Easter Bunny and was throwing candy off the senior balcony during a lunch period. I remember everyone being really excited until there was a fight over a specific candy bar. I've never been more excited to see teachers run after someone in a bunny suit in my entire life. That's some logic right there. People are fighting over a candy bar. Better chase the person who gave it to them. We had a fight week. 23 fights in 7 days. Doubled the cops at our school. A friend of mine and his girlfriend killed themselves within 2 days of each other after their breakup. It was horrible. RAM had just released Everybody Hurts, and they played it at the girl's funeral, to a group of high schoolers attending the second funeral of a fellow student in less than a week. It was rough. The Speech and Debate Club was suspended for 2 years after it was revealed that the officers were embezzling club funds. I went to a very boring high school. Adult family members of an expelled student came to the school and in the middle of class proceeded to beat up the teacher who was the reason he was expelled, as well as the janitor who came to see what all the commotion was. Teacher had a bloody nose and janitor had to be taken out on a stretcher with several broken ribs. We had a kid at my high school who brought his dad in for one of his beefs. I don't know what it was over exactly. I think it was an underage girl, cue facepalm, but the bad dad in question went so far as to bring brass knuckles to the on-campus fight. Because all adults know that beating the crap out of some kid your son doesn't like is best done on a high school campus populated by cameras and actual cops. Rough town. Rumors went around that the one being beat up died because bad dad punched his face to a bloody pulp, but I can't believe this because high school. My college suspended some students for eating breakfast during a lecture. One of the students decided to upload the hilarious suspension letter in Facebook, which mentioned suspended for eating or something like that. The picture went viral, local media caught it, national media caught it. College's day of shame. Back in high school, a few grades above me, there were about 5 people who decided to have a mass adult fun time party, and they all ended up getting herpes. Well, people found out, as they usually do, and from that point on, everyone in the area who heard my school's name instantly thought we all had herpes. Funnily enough, when on vacation in Colorado, a group I met at the same hotel from Texas had heard about my school's infamy somehow and thought it was hilarious. This was about 3 years after the incident, and my school was in Wisconsin. An assistant principal was arrested for killing his wife and trying to make it look like she took her own life. They made a Dateline or 48 Hours mystery about it. I can't remember. He was a pretty nice guy, but not to her, I guess. He was a pretty nice guy, but not to her, I guess? Understatement of the year. Our school stopped the yearly high school trip to Six Flags the year before I got to high school because someone, who I knew and was friends with my older brother, hopped off the Yosemite Sam ride and punched off Bugs Bunny's head. The cool guy Spanish teacher had a long-term relationship with multiple students, even paying for a few child terminations. That was like 10 years ago and I'd forgotten about it until a guy I knew from high school posted some new footage of the teacher shaking hands with Geraldo Rivera about 2 months ago. Not sure how he's not in prison. Bomb threat, kid threw acid on his friend's leg, basketball coach put a camera in the office and taped girls changing. How was that last school going after so much scandal? Jeepers creepers. It was 5th grade and recess after lunch had been cancelled because some parents complained about kids not having enough time to eat, even though you could be dismissed at any time by a teacher and could take as long as you wanted to eat. Everyone was upset, so this kid named Luke and a few of his friends decided we wanted to do something about it. Within minutes, everyone in the cafeteria was out of their minds, screaming, "We want recess!" swearing and throwing food at the lunch staff, and several people made a break for it and tried to run out of the lunchroom. Luke and a few others were suspended that day, and luckily their sacrifice meant that recess was reinstated for the rest of us. We now simply refer to the incident as the lunchroom riot. It never actually happened, but there was a rumor that there was going to be a shooting in my high school because somebody wrote on a bathroom stall in the department store next to the school that it was going to happen. And the best part of the day was seeing all the football team coaches standing around with baseball bats and nail boards. Senior class took fertilizer and other chemical agents to burn a giant dong into the football field. It could be seen on Google Maps for quite some time. I hear that you can do 2 different dongs in 2 different locations using different chemicals. One kills the grass now, one kicks in when the new term starts, but I can't remember what you were supposed to use. I'll bring this up for the 15-year reunion. During my sophomore year, the student body orchestrated a walkout because most of our electives were being cut to save money. Teachers who were losing their jobs also walked out with us. Classes like auto shop, wood shop, photography, home economics, all gone. The walkout did help as a few were reinstated the following year, while others were after my class graduated. My senior class did something similar. Our graduation date was being pushed back by 2 weeks so that we would graduate in the new auditorium that was being built. They informed us of this a month before our original graduation date. Since it's a tradition for seniors to go to Myrtle Beach the week after graduation, during senior week there, a lot of us had already made hotel reservations that would have cost money to cancel or change. What they didn't expect was for us to organize a sit-in in the cafeteria once the news broke. It lasted for an entire day until the newly elected superintendent showed up and told us that, while he respected what we were doing, that we'd better not pull anything like this again. We effectively got our graduation moved back to its original date and graduated in the gym while the next class was the first to graduate from the new auditorium. I don't know if it's relevant or not, but we were reading Animal Farm in AP English at the time, which may or may not have had a hand in our rebellion. Also, I know seniors reading Animal Farm in an AP English class is incredulous. I went to a public school in the poorest county in one of the poorest states in the US, West Virginia. Our teachers were constantly badgered to tailor their curriculum around material that would be covered on standardized tests. Higher or improved test scores meant that the school district would get more grant money. My school did frick all in terms of preparing us for higher education, and other than myself and a few close friends I still talk to, very few of us actually went on to get a degree. This girl posted on a transgender YouTube channel saying how she was going to blow up her high school and kill a lot of people. She described how she could do it because she was a student teacher, and she knew how to get away with it and kill the most people. The people on my channel notified police that tracked it down to my high school, and we had a huge lockdown because they had to check for any explosives. Well, that's certainly one way to get views on your channel, even if they are mostly coming from one police department. We had a PE teacher who'd done some awful things to some of the kids, who had left the year before I arrived. His replacement found this out, and instead of reporting this to the police and the school authorities, he wrote letters to all the parents of the children he thought were involved, and then went public to the newspapers. He got fired, and eventually, 6 years later, the former guy got imprisoned for 12 years. I was in my junior year, and it was finals week. Everyone usually gets to school about 20 minutes before class starts, and we just walk around the place talking with friends. Then all the teachers started ushering us all towards the road and away from the school. There was an active bomb threat. My high school was kind of a magnet school in a decent area, so we had no idea what was going on. Turns out some freshmen got scared and called in a bomb threat to get out of finals, on his own cell phone. We had fun though. One of my classmates was a DJ on the weekends. His pickup truck was a sort of convertible instant party, and he stood there killing it for over an hour. My high school used to allow every other year for the foreign language classes to go to that respective country over spring break. The school decided that the funds weren't there for it anymore, but still allowed people to go if they paid for it themselves and parents went with them. Anyway, the German class went to Germany, and of course the high school-age kids will drink over there. Well, the school caught wind and suspended all of them and kicked them out of National Honor Society. The uproar was insane. The school no longer sanctioned the trip nor paid, so they didn't have the right to do that, since it wasn't during school time. One of the parents of the students is very rich. They threatened the school by not giving their annual donation. Sure enough, all the students were reinstated. Wait, what? The school would allow them to go on a private vacation on their own time with their own money? Did the school also have the power to say, "Frick you, Colin, you're not allowed to visit your grandma this weekend"? One kid died in my gym class. We were doing a swimming lesson, so everyone was in the pool doing some laps, learning how to do the different strokes. After some laps, the gym teacher had us get out of the pool. A minute or so goes by, and someone shouts that there's someone at the bottom of the pool. I don't know if the gym teacher froze up or what, but it was a few seconds before a student finally dove in to drag him out of the pool. The teacher finally snaps out of it and tries to start CPR, and yells for someone to grab the defibrillator from the hallway. He tries to revive the kid, but it was too late, unfortunately. The kid was taking some meds, not sure what he was taking, maybe something for ADD or depression, but the autopsy came back showing he'd overdosed on whatever he was taking, so it was a deliberate taking of his own life. The kid overdosed before gym class, knowing that we were swimming in the pool. It was a really sad day, to say the least. Back in middle school, a deer got spooked by one of the school buses and jumped through the classroom window and started wandering the halls. My class then constructed a plan for if that ever happened again. It did not. A part of me hopes that the plan involved the principal suplexing the deer. Since people have been asking, the plan was to designate 2 people to throw the desks at the deer. One throws theirs high and the other throws theirs low. I was not picked as one of the throwers, unfortunately, but that's probably a good thing since I probably would have just cowered in the corner and not fulfilled my part of the plan. A guy decided to hang himself in the graveyard next to the school in full view of all the students. This being a religious school, they took it extremely seriously, doing mandatory class therapy sessions and crap when half the school didn't even see the body. There was also an abusive teacher there at the time who would threaten to or actually hit the kids for teeing him off. Not sure how he kept his job for so long. Eventually, he did lose it because he was having inappropriate conversations with a student over Snapchat. Always knew something was up with him. A fight broke out in the middle of the hallway while we were switching classes. Everyone crowded around to watch. The school cop burst in about a minute later and tased one of the guys fighting. He hit the floor and a bunch of kids started screaming that he had heart problems and to stop. A kid next to me exclaimed, "Oh crap, they're tasing people!" And he took off down the hallway running at full speed. He hit a corner and slid, falling flat on his face, and a gallon of milk fell out of his backpack and splattered all over the floor. To this day, I don't know why that kid had a gallon of milk at school. This story was more or less C grade and par for the course until the milk came out of the backpack, which has upgraded it to a solid A. Well done, Milk Kid. This is actually kind of a saga. Luckily, it didn't happen directly to me. I grew up in a small rednecky town in midwestern Wisconsin. Think about the stereotype that brings up and you're pretty much on the level as to how it really was at the time I was there. It was one of those small schools that housed all the K-12 students in the same building, but separate wings, although we used the same lunchroom. My class was the biggest on record up until then, and we had something like 80 students in it. I was actually in middle school when this happened, so early 90s, but one of the 2 high school English teachers was a man named Gene Doonigan. Gene was like the stereotype right out of the Wonder Years, horn-rimmed glasses and all. Gene was frickin' mean as a motherfricker. He was one of those buttholes who would grab and twist your ear and lead you down to the main office himself. Happened to me once, and I wasn't even his student. My crime was not having all 4 of my chair legs on the ground. He made sure it hurt. Gene was also a drunk. He eventually got fired because he was wasted in class. Some high schooler mouthed off to him, and he punched the kid full on in the face. Poor guy was wearing glasses, which of course broke, and the cuts he got from the glass needed stitches. But it doesn't end there. This was a small town, remember? And Gene was also the sitting town judge. He didn't lose that position, and my particular town had one of those incestuous police departments, and Gene was basically the guy calling the shots for them. He had always had a reputation for forming personal grudges and using the PD to stake them out and try to bust them for something. He especially did this to what he considered the undesirables in the school, basically the ones who looked like they used substances, who, to be honest, were usually substance users, but he didn't like the metalheads either. With nothing more to do with his time, he went all out on the kids in town he didn't like. This went on for years, but I don't have any personal stories because my mom was a town clerk and I was somehow immune from being harassed. A lot of my friends weren't. Well anyways, eventually he retired from that, and almost immediately he was arrested for trying to do the unspeakable act with an autistic kid. He was convicted and died in prison. It was a sweet satisfaction that happened. Our high school stopped having dances because one girl gave a guy head during an event and got caught. Turns out it was my sister's best friend at the time. I like to think my sister was much classier than that. People are asking which school. I'm tempted not to say just to rustle some jimmies. A few, I guess. Dead pig left in a Tesco bag in the sports field. It was break time, various teens ran out to play football, and there it was, a dead pig in a bag. A guy in my year fell out of his bedroom window trying to smoke sneakily. A graffiti tribute was made on one of the school buildings and promptly removed as it was vandalism. A girl in the year below mine had an affair with a school bus driver, resulting in several child terminations and a certain bus driver being suspended. Changing rooms were set on fire. I was off ill on the day, returned to school the following day to find everyone had detention until somebody owned up. I feel it was rather unfair that I was detained when I was off sick. Labs set on fire and copper wire stolen, but we know who did it and they got suspended. 2 teachers had nervous breakdowns and went stark raving loony in front of the students before quitting the teaching profession. We had a presentation about tolerance, which was stupid as my school was super laid back, people had issues, but not about race or gender, in our auditorium. This was in 2009, just after Obama's election. At one point, the group is on stage and making small talk to us. Guy on stage, "We got a new president. President Obama. How do you guys feel about that?" Or some stupid pandering crap. Guy in the crowd stands and shouts, "We don't need a frickin' N-word in the White House." Holy crap, dude. I was in the upper bowl next to some of the black and Latino kids. This kid says his piece and everybody next to me is on him, like 35 feet between us and a flight of stairs. This kid gets the crap beat out of him. Teachers finally managed to pull everybody off. Kid has to be taken to the hospital, luckily nearby. Afterwards, we realized that we had no idea who the kid was. Turns out he was with the group and was supposed to say that as a thought-provoking kind of thing about how offensive and hurtful racism is. They didn't tell any of the staff about this. The presentation went on fine, but nobody was paying attention anymore. We were all furious. He was okay, by the way. None of my class got in trouble. They apologized afterwards. Also, we were mostly a white school, maybe 60%, and it wasn't just the black kids jumping on him. Mexicans, whites, whatever. After it happened, they said they stopped doing that bit. Next stop was apparently Chicago, so good call. Classmate slapped his girlfriend for going to a dance with someone else. A couple of days later, she was not in school. During math, her mum comes in and says to my classmate, "You took a piece of my heart, and now I'm going to take a piece of yours." And then she pulls out a Crocodile Dundee-sized Bowie knife, tells everyone to leave, and starts chasing him around the room with it, while he and the teacher threw desks at her. No, the girl didn't kill herself. The mum just kept her home because she was going to try to get all stabby at school. The mum went to prison. Oh, and some kids were playing with bits of sodium or potassium in chemistry class by throwing it in the sink and watching it fizzle. It's normally stored under oil because it reacts in air and violently with water. One kid pocketed it, and they took it to the locker room to throw bigger bits in the toilet. They heard someone coming, panicked, and threw the whole thing in and flushed. It blew the toilet into pieces. Years ago, my school was accused of promoting slavery because of a book included in our curriculum. I think the book was called Slavery, as it was, if I recall correctly. Newsworthy. Reporters were outside our school for about a week. ABC News called for a comment. Students were instructed not to talk to any of the reporters. The rumors got really exaggerated, but it originated from an angry parent. Eventually, it blew over. Not high school, but 8th grade. Me and the whole boys' PE class was pulled out of class for a day so the teachers could sniff out the ninja crapper. Apparently someone was stealth crapping in as many places as they could get away with. It happened in the school hallway, the urinals, the girls' bathroom, the walls, the cafeteria. If you named it, the ninja crapper had probably crapped there. The school never figured out who did it, and this went on for over a month. Hospital staff. What are your experiences with people waking from anesthesia? A patient woke up from his wisdom tooth removal, begging the doctor to let him be David Bowie. The doctor actually asked how that was supposed to happen, and the answer was that it would be fantastic. He then sang a pitch-perfect rendition of Space Oddity in an admirable Bowie impression, peed his pants, and passed out. Had a patient ring in for an endoscopy. As a matter of course, we placed a speculum, think a ball gag but a metal ring instead of a ball, in his mouth through which to pass the scope so the patient doesn't bite the scope once they're under. We typically place it right at induction of anesthesia. This patient had the presence of mind to ask us what the safe word was before he lost consciousness as we placed the speculum. One of the rare times the whole OR erupted in laughter. I once had a patient start totally trashing her sister, telling me how she's always been the black sheep of the family, is a scumbag, and wants to bang her husband. She's just going off, and sitting in the doorway was the sister, the only one there to support her after surgery. You could tell it was crushing for her. This is probably an hour after the patient left PACU, conscious but still pretty whacked out. Oh no, poor sis. Well, hopefully that anesthetic-induced spell was the motivation the sisters needed to hash out their differences once everyone was lucid again. Is it like alcohol where the whole lot of truth is said when drunk/sedated? Or is it just fantasy bullcrap nonsense that people can sometimes spew? The whole truth comes out when you're drinking thing is probably just an old wives' tale anyway. Being inebriated in any way doesn't lend itself to fluid thinking or speaking. So I'm going to say it's just Fantasyland type stuff. My dad was in a really bad motorcycle crash a while back, and when he was in and out of it, he was saying crazy crap. Like, "Honey, we can't keep living in this fricking tree," to my mum. Then he kept making everyone leave the room but me to tell me father-son secrets, which included crap like, "Go in the closet and get the kid with the big head out of the garbage bag and tell him to get a job." I had a patient pet an invisible kitty that was named after me. The next day was completely with it and was wondering what happened to that kitty. I'm an anesthesia student currently doing my clinical rotations, and I had an old guy wake up, and the first thing he asked was, "Do I still have my balls?" I told him, "Yep, both of them," and he said, "Both? Oh, you guys are great." Not a hospital staff, but my great-grandfather had surgery one time, and I was in the room when he woke up. He was a World War II veteran and was convinced that he was in a German World War II prisoner of war camp. He recognized me and told him I had to help him escape by killing the guards, or nurses, because he knew I knew how to kill people. I was 16, obviously a trained killer. When the nurse came in, he was calm and kept motioning with his head at her to me, and finally looked at me and said, "Kill her, now!" She always came back with another male nurse after that. "Hey Grandpa, remember that time you told me to murder all the hospital staff?" "Yeah." "I've never had a normal relationship." Wow, my grandfather had a similar response. He was convinced he was back in the war. He said, "Don't go downstairs. They're doing awful things to the prisoners there." When he came to, I asked him about that, and he didn't want to talk about it. He was not a prisoner of war in the war, but was a guard at one of our own camps in the US. He said there were both good and bad guys on both sides and would not elaborate further. Nurse here, this really big hairy Turkish guy who I've never met before, told me how he loved me and that he wanted to kiss me. I'm male, by the way. My father-in-law was in a car accident that shattered his face, several vertebrae, and his pelvis. This isn't so much a story about what he said, but what he did. He was in a coma for 3 weeks and had to be heavily restrained when coming out of it. He was a Marine in Vietnam, and he was captured and escaped, and he still hated being restrained. My wife went to visit him on a Sunday, and the doctors told him that tomorrow he was going to be the first patient to use a new $30,000 restraint system that would cause him less discomfort. On Monday afternoon, she visited again, and he was in the same restraints as before. My wife asked, and the nurse explained that he destroyed the restraint system. It lasted less than an hour. It wasn't salvageable. I had a lot of ear infections when I was younger, and my final time, I was about 7, I woke up to the Rugrats on a TV in the room. I hated the Rugrats at the time. Cue the following conversation. Me. "Why are the Rugrats on?" Doctor. "You woke up earlier and you said you wanted us to put on the Rugrats. We asked why, and you said that you hated the Rugrats and wanted to watch it so you could be angry." Me. "Why did I want to be angry?" Doctor. "You said you wanted to be angry because you don't like being so happy all the time." That's hilarious. Are you still a happy person, or did the Rugrats ruin you? Rugrats did not ruin my happiness, for long, but depression has for the past year or so, as is the case with your average Redditor. It gets easier, but it's a really slow process. Still, I do my best to wake up and make every day count for something that matters to me, because I know in the end that's what's going to make a difference. As you can probably imagine, I had a very early angsty phase. Told to me by my wife, confirmed by the nurse. I was in bed in a hospital room waiting for surgery, and they'd already given me the meds to calm me down, but they knocked me out. 2 nurses came in to move me to a gurney, but they were small and I'm big, and they can't move me over. My wife came over and poked me in the ribs, saying,
"You're snoring. Roll over." And I rolled right onto the gurney. Your wife is brilliant. Just goes to show a stern word from the right partner can cut through even the harshest, debilitating substance effects on the male human body. Went straight from the ER to surgery to put a plate in my badly broken arm, so I hadn't been on a ward, etc. prior to the operation. Came out of surgery and recovery and was being pushed in a hospital bed to a ward. We turned into a ward and it was full of elderly people. I was in my early 20s. I turned to the hospital porter pushing me and shouted, "Sorry, we seem to have taken a wrong turn. We're in the morgue." Ha ha ha. I hope they didn't hear you. Oh, they heard all right. It was an awkward stay after that. My first memory when waking up from shoulder surgery was a somewhat panicked nurse rummaging through the blankets at the bottom of my bed, repeatedly muttering, "Where are his legs? Where are his legs?" I always cross my legs when I sit or lay down, and apparently I must have done this, as I was initially coming off the anesthesia. It freaked me out for a second, but then I processed what was going on. The nurse seemed relieved when I mumbled, "They're right there," and nearly kicked her in the face when I extended my legs. Patient checking in. I was 18 and just had my appendix removed. My mum was at my bedside. I wake up in more pain from the operation than the appendicitis, and even worse, my balls are itchy. I'm wearing a hospital gown and I'm out of it, so I put my hand on my stomach and run it down my skin so I can scratch my gonads. Obviously not wearing underwear, and my hand runs down in excess of smooth skin, then suddenly I'm touching my goods. I rummage around and come to the conclusion that somebody has shaved my pubes. No one told me this would happen. I was livid. It's the height of visiting hours and I'm shouting in my broad Scottish accent, "Oh, Mum, they've shaved my pubes. I'm not happy about this. I want my pubes back. That's not right. No one told me about this. Get my pubes." My mother was mortified and she's trying to calm me down while laughing and trying to avoid a scene. They grew back in about 4 weeks, so it was no biggie, but at the time it was a serious issue. Yo, my balls were mad itchy after appendicitis surgery too, and yeah, the pain after the surgery was worse than the appendicitis. I'd gone into surgery with underwear on and came out with no underwear and no pubes. Very confusing. To clarify, my surgery was laparoscopic, so they made horizontal incisions, and the lowest one is encroaching on my pube territory. So to avoid contamination or whatever, they shave ya. I was 15 when I went into surgery for my very nearly ruptured appendix, but unfortunately I was also a shy teenage girl. I kept my undies on under the gown. Before I completely faded out on the table, I heard someone say, "Why does she still have her underwear on?" The first time I went for surgery, I completely forgot to take mine off. It just didn't cross my mind, even though I'm a nurse and I'm fully aware. When I was in the recovery room coming around, the nurse waved a little plastic bag in front of me with underwear in it and was like, "Don't worry, we'll put these in your bag." I'm glad. They were Cookie Monster underwear. Yes, I'm a 27-year-old female, don't judge. So I'm an ER tech and we have this regular that comes in all the time. She's an old black lady who has a lot of health issues, including dementia. This time I'm actually not entirely sure why she was coming in, but whatever it was, she needed to be intubated. So we sedated her, put the tube in, and did what we needed. When everything was finished, we called EMS to pick her up and take her back home. When they arrived, the nurse and I went to prep her to leave. The lady is just starting to wake up from sedation, so with EMTs standing in the room, we take out her Foley catheter. She then toots out of her hoo-ha. The nurse and I smirk at each other, but this is fairly common and not the funny part. The funny part is that the noise seemed to surprise her and apparently remind her what was going on, because she gasps, then looks over to the EMTs and says in an attempt at a sexy voice, "You boys ever seen a black hoo-ha before?" Everyone in the room had to take a second to attempt to regain composure, but the EMTs ended up having to leave the room and the nurse is crouching on the ground trying not to die. I, since I still have the Foley in my hands, don't have this freedom and am forced to keep my sides from launching into orbit. It's since become a running joke around the ER. When my husband woke up from having his wisdom teeth surgically removed, his nurse was a rather large lady, like 350 pounds. He looked her dead in the eyes and said, "You're too beautiful to be a nurse. You should have been a model. Why don't you come home with me and my wife?" Yes, he was propositioning a three-way with a 50-year-old 350-pound nurse. Most awkward moments of my life. How nice he wanted to include you, though. Even high out of his mind, he wouldn't even consider the thought of not including you. True love right there. I got my wisdom teeth out last month and was curiously subdued, my wife informed me, at least at the office. She loaded me up in the car and away we went. About halfway home, she called my mother to let her know that the surgery went well, and I remained stonily quiet. After she got off the phone, I demanded that my wife call my mother back. When she did so, I told her, "Mom, you have a lot of dogs, and they need lots of love." Then I made the cut the call motion to my wife. When we arrived home, I was brought up short by my wife's pillowcase, which has a sloth on it. I asked out loud, "Honey, there's a frickin' sloth in here. How did we catch one? They're so fast." Then she tried to take my jeans off me so I could go to sleep, and I yelled, "Whoa there, missy," when she grabbed for the fly. All in all, a pretty great morning. When I was 14, I had eye surgery. Coming out of anesthesia, the nurses asked me if I could remember my name. I slurred, "My name is Worcestershire Sauce." "No, wait, that's not a cool name. My name is Shark." I can't even pronounce Worcestershire Sauce completely sober. Impressive. So this comment was written, and I'm unable to tell if they pronounced it Worcestershire, and it's going to bother me for the remainder of this recording. My fiancée recently had her tonsils removed. Her mother and I were there when she woke up. After a few minutes, she told her mother, "Now that I've got my tonsils out, I can fit more of his wang in my mouth." It was awkward. When I got my wisdom teeth out, I apparently called my Middle Eastern surgeon a sly Arabian tooth thief after coming to. That was fun to learn about when I regained mental clarity. I had surgery on my wrist, and I came out of anesthesia screaming, "My balls hurt!" The doctor came in and asked what was wrong. I said, "My balls hurt!" He replied, "Dude, you got wrist surgery. No one touched your balls." Doesn't necessarily mean they couldn't have been hurting, though. We're trained to do manual handling of the patient a certain way. But sometimes while transferring from the trolley or bed into an operating table, things can not go entirely right and part of the body hits something or is mishandled. Note, we obviously try to avoid this, and 99% of the time, nothing happens. There's also sterile drapes all over one's body, except the surgery place, pretty much in any surgery. Some surgeons forget there's a body there and kinda use it as a table, so some damage could derive from that, depending on exactly what happened. All this to say, someone might have accidentally hurt your balls during surgery. I had a lady in her 70s who drank martinis and took Xanax all day, every day. So she had such a strong tolerance to the sedation I was giving her that she just totally stopped breathing while still awake. I had to say, "Ma'am, I'm gonna have to bag you now," and she mouthed, "Okay," and I put the ambu bag on her face and force-breathed for her until she got her respiratory effort back. Another story, I was helping with a heart procedure and the patient went into complete heart block and his heart stopped beating. I hop up on the table and start chest compressions while they're hurriedly trying to put in a temporary pacing wire. I had an arterial pressure waveform on the monitor, so I could see exactly how hard to do the compressions, and the man never lost consciousness. So I'm doing chest compressions on a dude while he looks right at my face the whole time. So it was like, press, press, sorry, press, press, sorry, for about 2 minutes until the pacing wire was in place. Not a doc, but a few years ago I had my gallbladder removed. 2 stories from that ordeal. Going into surgery, I was being given anesthesia. During this, I apparently looked up at the tech and asked him to remove the mask from my face so I could scratch my nose. He said, "No," and I passed out halfway through my response of, "Aww." Still very out of it, getting ready to be discharged after a day if I recovered. It was very bad and I was on a lot of meds. I stood up to change and could feel the incision just below my navel open. I looked down and my hand was red and there was a growing red spot on the gown. I look up and see the color drain from my mother's face, to which I respond, "It's cool, I got this." Got back into bed, hit the call button and say, "I don't mean to bother you, but one of my incisions appears to have reopened. No, I'm not in pain, but there is a fair bit of blood. If you could have someone stop by when they're free, that would be awesome." Not 15 seconds later, a nurse comes flying into the room, looks and says, "Holy crap, be right back with supplies," and flies out of the room before returning and fixing the problem. When asked why I wasn't panicking, I simply responded, "I figure I'm already in the right place for this sort of thing." I was the patient. I'd had all 4 wisdom teeth out at once, and I woke up earlier than expected for recovery. Early enough that they hadn't taken out the wadding at the back of my mouth meant to absorb the blood. So I woke up, immediately felt like I was choking, and panicked. I leapt off the bed and a bunch of nurses came to restrain me. Still out of it, I fought them, and definitely gave one of them a good punch before they got me back in the bed. I passed out again straight away. Still feel bad about it. Poor nurse. When I got all 4 of my wisdom teeth taken out, the nurse tried to put me in a wheelchair. Cue dialogue. Super hot nurse, "Let's get you in a wheelchair." Me, "I got it, baby."
Think Fetty Wap type accent. I'm very white. Super hot nurse. Oh no, I don't think that's a good idea. Me tries to stand but slams into wall and slides down face first. Super hot nurse. Oh no! She put me in the wheelchair and rolled me to the car. I giggled the whole way there while leaning my head on her hand and looking up at her face. Side note, hands down the best 2 weeks of summer I've ever had. KFC potatoes and ice cream all day while in a medicated stupor? Hell yes. I hear I just played Minecraft with my little brother and dug enormous holes the entire time. About a week and a half afterwards, I asked him what the frick I'd been doing, and he said, "You've dug 4 50 by 50 holes to bedrock with staircases around the sides. All the minerals are in 200 large chests surrounding the holes." When he asked why 50 by 50, he said that I turned to him, looked him in the eye and told him, "It's what they would have wanted." All of our friends were tripping out, saying, "What's he doing?" He'd reply, "What do you think? He's being force-fed mashed potatoes while he mumbles, 'We're almost finished. The plans will be completed.'" I love this story. Also, playing video games in a med-induced trance while being fed soft foods kinda sounds like the best-case scenario post-hospitalization to me. Came out of anesthetic and the lead nurse decides it's time to tell me about post-op care. She says, "Now this is going to be a pain in the butt," and I said, "If that's the case, then you guys performed the wrong procedure." It was a nose operation. The assistant nurse started laughing. Lead nurse not so amused. When I got my wisdom teeth out, they strapped my arm down for the IV anesthetic. Apparently before passing out, I looked up at the white-haired German dentist and said in my best Connery, "Goldfinger, do you expect me to talk?" The dentist didn't reply, but he did tell me after surgery that it was one of the funniest things anyone ever asked him in a haze. My dental surgeon had a hilarious Bond villain-esque name, and I made some jokes about it in the weeks up to getting my wisdom teeth out, like how I hoped I still had my kidneys when I woke up, etc. On the actual day, I was petrified of making the same jokes to the surgeon in a drug-induced haze and embarrassing myself. So apparently, I kept asking the nurse, "I didn't say anything bad, did I?" "No, my darling, you were out like a light." "Are you sure I didn't say anything bad?" Over and over. A friend was in a car crash, pretty bad. He was in a coma for 2 months and he had a female doctor. For 2 months until he came out of his coma, every time his doctor was checking on him, he would reach up and grab her bosom, guessing he heard her voice. When we told him about that, he didn't believe us, so he asked her and she confirmed it. She said she never stopped him because it seemed to keep him calm. I think this qualifies. Colonoscopy, in this big lounge chair, still half asleep in recovery. I half roll over and let rip the biggest toot in history. The devil himself created this one. I open half an eye at the nurse and ask, "Was that me?" Jaw on the ground. She nods and I go back to sleep. "I mean, you have to toot after the colonoscopy or they don't let you go home." "Give back the air or we'll call the police." As a patient, I had to get 5 teeth pulled. The nurse was helping my mum shuffle me to the car. I turned to thank her but couldn't get my mouth to work, so I bowed and doffed an imaginary cap. "My anesthesia?" My BFF had a vasectomy, and when he was first given the drugs, 3 nurses walked in there that were rather attractive. He looked up with his wife in the room and says, "If I would have known there was going to be hot women in here, I would have worn my big dick." He wasn't put under, just given drugs to relax him. I'm guessing Valium or something equivalent. And he is one funny motherfricker to begin with. When the surgery was over, the doctor was telling him he needed to arrive 10 times before he was sterile. As he was being wheeled out of the waiting room and in front of little kids, he was demanding a prescription for oral fun times. Probably my proudest moment of him. His wife, still to this day, loves to bring up this story. I shadowed a surgery once with this guy who woke up saying, "Give it to me straight, Doc. Will I ever play the piano again?" All of us were cracking up and he then goes, "Oh, wait, I don't know how to play the piano." When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, linked at the top of the description. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot, linked in the description too. Either way, thanks a lot for watching and we'll see you guys next time.